began as a lid of iron pressed upon the world, and the wind moved through the pines like a prayer whispered by a mouth too wounded to speak aloud. No moon guided the rider, no star confessed its position. Only the black outline of the forest and the damp breath of earth rose to meet the men who travelled beneath it, and the silence was so thick that even the horses seemed to step with restraint, as if the ground itself belonged to someone listening. Orhan Sahib rode at the front, his cloak dark as spilled ink, his gaze fixed not on the road but on the unseen line of fate that all men march toward whether they accept it or not. In his chest lived the old fire of justice, and it was not the fire of comfort. It was the fire of burden, the fire of command, the fire that consumes sleep and leaves only duty in its place. He did not speak for a long time, and that quiet was heavier than any speech, for when a commander falls silent, the earth itself begins to wonder what he knows that others do not. Beside him, moving as a shadow that had learned to wield steel, rode Turan, Aran's right hand, the elite swordsman whose name was spoken in camps the way men speak the name of a storm they once survived. Turan's eyes scanned the darkness, not with fear, but with the patience of a wolf. He held his reins loose, ready to shift, ready to strike, ready to become a shield before his commander's body without needing to be told. Behind them, the column breathed. Damir Khan, with his stern brow and measured cruelty toward himself, Mahmud with his jaw clenched as if he was biting down on doubt, Abdul Rahman murmuring verses under his breath, Tamir Boga checking the straps of saddles and the grips of spears, Mustafa and Altuddin Sahib counting footsteps and listening for betrayal the way men listen for wolves. Farther back rode Zarkan and Kulads with the scouts, and Kilal who carried messages like a man carrying live coals. Al-Aluddin Sahib moved with the reserve of a scholar who had been forced into war and had discovered that blood answers questions faster than ink. Jarkata Sahib brought the rear guard, the last line between the column and whatever hunger followed. And somewhere beyond the forest, beyond the ridges, beyond the streams, beyond the old stones and forgotten graves, waited the hand that had shaped this night into a trap. Shahanshah. The opposing ruler, crowned in deception, robed in manipulation, a man who spoke with honeyed sorrow and signed with poison. He had grown desperate, and desperation makes even a king resemble a thief. His messengers had come with smiles and gifts and false oaths. His spies had come with prayer beads and friendly eyes. His promises had come wrapped in silk, and inside that silk was the rope meant for Orhan Sahib's throat. But it was not Shahanshah's name that tightened Orhan's jaw, it was Yaqid. That name was a stain, a former brother in arms whose loyalty had once stood shoulder to shoulder with them, beneath banners wet with rain and victory. A man who had eaten from their shared pot, prayed on their shared ground, and then turned with the precision of a knife slipping between ribs. Not a traitor for gold alone, not a traitor for fear alone, but a traitor for the sick hunger of ambition. And the consequence of such hunger is always the same. It devours the one who feeds it, even if the world must burn first. Orhan Sahib finally spoke, his voice low, as if he feared the trees might carry it to enemy ears. In the name of Allah, the Most High, we will not be hunted like deer in our own lands. Torhan answered without turning his head. By Allah, we will be the hunters. Damir Khan leaned closer. The scouts report no torches, no movement. Orhan's gaze did not soften, though that is what they want us to believe. As the night deepened, the forest narrowed, the branches leaning in like judges listening for confession. The path curved around a marsh that smelled of rot and old water. A faint mist clung to the ground, and hoofbeats vanished into it. Somewhere an owl called, and the sound fell like a pebble into a well. Then, without warning, the first arrow came, a whisper of death slicing air, and Turan moved before the mind could name what the eyes had not yet understood. He lifted his shield, and the arrow struck it with a crack that sounded like a bone breaking. Another arrow came, and another. The darkness erupted with the hiss of shafts, and men shouted. Horses reared, metal rang. Someone cried out, and the cry ended abruptly as if a hand had closed around the throat of sound itself. Ambush? Mustafa roared. Orhan Sahib did not flinch. He raised his arm, and his voice cut through chaos like a blade. Hold the line, do not scatter, in Allah's name hold. Turhan surged forward, shield high, sword drawn, stepping into the rain of arrows as if he were walking into hail. He intercepted what he could, steel against wood, wood against iron, while urging men to the trees, urging them to cover. Abdul Rahman's voice rose with a verse, steady and fierce, and it steadied the hearts of those who heard it. Damir Khan barked orders. Archers into the brush, find their shadows, return fire. The forest answered with more arrows and the sudden rush of bodies. The enemy had been waiting in the undergrowth, crouched in mud and leaves, their faces darkened, their breaths held. Now they sprang like wolves. Swords flashed, spears thrust. The fight became intimate, filthy, personal, man against man in the narrow corridor between trunks, where there is no room for banners and no time for speeches. Orhan Sahib's horse stumbled as something struck its flank, and Orhan swung down, landing hard, his boots sinking into damp soil. He drew his blade, the steel catching a faint glimmer of starlight, and he stepped forward, meeting a charging enemy with a single clean strike. Blood splattered warm against his wrist. Another man came. Orhan turned, parried, and drove his shoulder into the attacker's chest, sending him crashing into a sapling. The sapling snapped, and the crack sounded like fate laughing. Orhan was everywhere at once, moving through the melee with the ruthless clarity of a man born for the edge of a sword. He caught an incoming blade on his guard and twisted, disarming the enemy, then cut low, ending the man's legs beneath him. He pivoted, took an arrow meant for Orhan into his shield again, and growled through clenched teeth, "Stay with me, Sahib." Orhan's eyes were cold. "I do not die in a forest like an animal." Then the enemy's second wave came, and it was disciplined, too disciplined for mere bandits. This was Shahanshah's hand. Soldiers trained to strike and vanish. Soldiers meant to break morale by making night itself seem hostile. Tamir Buga rallied men near a fallen log. "Who to me, shields up." He slammed his spear into the ground, forming a point for retreating fighters to gather. Mahmud dragged a wounded man back by the collar, teeth bared in effort. Zarkan's scouts emerged from the trees behind the attackers. Having looped wide, they struck from the rear with knives, opening throats in silence, turning hunters into prey. Orhan Sahib's mind worked like a map. He saw where the arrows came from. He saw where the enemy's weight pressed. He saw the way the path narrowed, a place designed to trap, to compress, to panic. He raised his blade and shouted, "Put Emir Khan! Take 30 and circle left. Cut their archers from the ridge. Mustafa, drive a wedge through the center. Turhan, stay on me." Turhan did not answer with words. He answered by stepping closer, shoulder aligned with Orhan's, and together they pushed forward into the thick of it. The fight became a storm. Leaves shredded, bark splintered, men slipped in mud mixed with blood. The smell of iron rose like incense, and it clung to beards and sleeves. A spear grazed Orhan's side, tearing cloth and skin. Pain flashed hot. He ignored it. He grabbed the shaft and yanked the enemy forward, then drove his blade into the man's ribs. The man's eyes widened, then went dull. Orhan released him and moved on without looking back. Somewhere to the right, Altuddin Sahib roared as he tackled an enemy off a boulder, both men crashing into ferns. Kilal darted through shadows, delivering shouted fragments of orders, his breath sharp. Jarkata Sahib's rear guard held firm, preventing the ambush from closing like a jaw. Then came the turning sound, a horn, low and mocking, echoing through the trees, Shahanshah's signal, a taunt. And with that horn came a new terror, fire. Torches flew into the brush, oil-soaked rags landed among dry needles. Flames caught fast, licking upward with hungry tongues. Smoke crawled through the forest like a serpent. The night, once silent, now crackled and roared. Shadows danced madly on trunks, turning men into giants and demons. "Fire!" Mahmud shouted, coughing as smoke bit his lungs. Orhan Sahib's eyes narrowed. "They would burn their own forest to burn us with it." Torhan spat. Desperation. The flames changed everything. The enemy thought smoke would blind Orhan's men, force them into the open, break their formation. But Orhan Sahib saw another truth. Fire reveals as much as it destroys. It illuminates the hidden. It forces the ambusher to show his hand. Use the light, Orhan shouted. Look for silhouettes. Strike where they think they are unseen. Damir Khan returned from the left with blood on his forearms. Archers cut down. Ridge is ours. Orhan nodded once, then pointed toward a narrower trail veering away from the main path. There, the enemies retreat. They will try to vanish into the ravine. We will not allow it. Mustafa, take men and seal it. Tamir Boga, gather the wounded and move them behind the stone outcrop. The battle surged toward the ravine as if pulled by an invisible rope. Men fought while coughing, eyes watering, sweat mixing with soot. A soldier's cloak caught fire. He rolled screaming, and Abdul Rahman and Kulad stamped it out, hands burning. Faces set with grim devotion. And then, as the fire grew, Orhan Sahib heard a voice in the smoke, familiar, venomous, close. Orhan? It was spoken like a lover's sigh and a murderer's promise. Orhan turned, blade lifted. From the haze stepped Burhan Faladios, fierce commander, his armor darker than night, his presence like a storm compacted into human form. The old rivalry between Faladios and Yaqid had been known among the captains, a rivalry sharpened by pride, by wounds of honor, by histories of insult and narrow escapes. Faladios' eyes were bright with rage held under discipline. My scouts found a mark, Faladios said, voice rough. A trail of prints not meant to be seen. Yaqid passed here. He is near. Orhan Sahib's jaw tightened. He dares to show his face so close. Faladios' mouth twisted. He dares because Shahanshah promised him safety. Orhan's blade tilted slightly upward. No safety exists beneath Allah's decree. Faladios leaned closer to Orhan. Give me leave. Orhan Sahib studied him for a heartbeat, long enough for the fire to pop and spit. Do not chase vengeance into a trap. Faladios' eyes did not waver. Vengeance is not what I seek consequence. Orhan Sahib nodded once. Then go, but go with eyes open. Take Zarkan, take Kulads. And if you find Yaqid, do not let pride blind you. Faladios bowed his head and he vanished into smoke like a blade sliding into a sheath. The forest combat did not end quickly. It could not. It clung, it resisted, it snarled, but Orhan Sahib's formation held. His men did not scatter into the burning dark. They pushed in measured surges, using shield walls where they could, using tree trunks as cover, cutting down those who tried to flee, letting the fire herd the enemy into tighter spaces. Then, as the night staggered toward its deepest point, the horn sounded again, this time not mocking but urgent. The enemy began to pull back, slipping away like water through fingers. Orhan Sahib did not pursue blindly. He had learned that a retreat can be a rope tied to a pit. Hold, he commanded, breathing smoke. So do not chase shadows, count our dead, bind our wounded. Damir Khan's face was streaked with soot. They withdraw north. Toward the old stone bridge, Orhan Sahib's mind traced the map. The stone bridge was narrow, choke point. Another trap, unless seized first. Orhan wiped blood from his blade with a strip of cloth torn from a fallen enemy. We take it before dawn. Orhan Sahib looked toward the burning trees, then toward the darker stretch of forest beyond the flames. Yes, but not with haste, with intent. As men gathered, as Abdul Rahman knelt beside the wounded whispering supplications, as Tamir Boga set guards, as Mahmud counted arrows left in quivers, Orhan Sahib walked among them. He touched shoulders. He spoke names. He lifted a fallen helmet and placed it gently beside its owner. War makes beasts of men, but a commander must remain human, or else he becomes the very thing he claims to fight. In the name of Allah, Orhan murmured to himself, let my justice not become cruelty. Then a messenger stumbled from the trees, nearly falling at Orhan's feet. It was Kilal, eyes wide, breath ragged. Sahib, Kilal rasped to Faladios. He found Yakid's trail. They go toward the ravine beyond the burned grove. Orhan stepped forward. How far? Kilal swallowed. Too close. Too close. Orhan Sahib's gaze sharpened. He knew what lived inside Faladios, a controlled fury that could become a blind charge if Yakid was near. And he knew what lived inside Yakid, cunning enough to turn even his own blood into bait. Orhan Sahib made his decision. Orhan. With me. Damir Khan, you hold the men here. Mustafa, you prepare to move toward the bridge at first light. We will not lose the forest and the bridge in one night. We will not lose Faladios to pride. Orhan nodded once. As you command. They moved fast and quiet, slipping through smoke and dark, following the faintest of signs, broken twigs, disturbed ash, footprints pressed into damp soil. The fire behind them crackled, but ahead the forest returned to its old silence, a silence now filled with threat. As they approached the ravine, the air cooled, the ground sloped, rocks appeared slick with moisture, water could be heard far below, a constant murmur like a crowd that never stops whispering. Then came the sound of steel meeting steel. Orhan Sahib halted, raising a fist. Orhan crouched slightly, listening. A grunt, a scrape, a sharp exhale, then a voice, unmistakable, Faladio. Forward, Faladio snarled, you hide behind kings and smoke. Another voice answered, smooth, familiar, bitter, Yakid. I hide behind nothing. I stand where the wise stand, behind the inevitable. Orhan Sahib's blood ran cold. They crept closer, and the trees opened into a narrow clearing by the ravine's edge, lit by a thin, merciless strip of starlight. There, like two fates colliding, stood Faladios and Yakid. Yakid's armor was fine, but his eyes were finer, sharp, calculating, restless. He held his blade angled low, stance disciplined. Faladios stood broader, heavier, moving like a man who would rather break stone than argue with it. Around them lay two bodies, scouts perhaps. One wore Orhan's colors, the other wore none. Orhan whispered, we has already killed tonight. Orhan Sahib did not answer. His focus locked onto Yakid. Faladios took a step forward, and his voice shook with contained thunder. You sold men to Shahanshah, you opened gates, you sent us into arrows. Yakid smiled faintly. I send you into truth. You follow Orhan because he wears righteousness like a cloak, but beneath it he is only another man who wishes to rule. Faladios' blade rose. Orhan seeks justice. Yakid's eyes gleamed. Justice is the word men use when they want blood to sound holy. At that, Faladios lunged. Steel clashed. The duel began with no ceremony, no audience applause, only the ravine and the trees and Allah above watching two souls measure each other. Faladios struck heavy, overhand cuts meant to split, thrust meant to end. Yakid moved with economy, slipping aside, parrying, redirecting, letting Faladios' strength spend itself into air. Faladios drove forward again, forcing Yakid back toward the ravine edge. Yakid's heel found loose stone. He shifted, recovered, then darted in, his blade flicking toward Faladios' throat. Faladios twisted, the edge grazing his beard, and he answered with a savage backhand cut that tore across Yakid's shoulder. Blood darkened Yakid's armor. Yakid hissed, then laughed softly. You fight with anger? Faladios breathed hard. I fight with truth. Yakid's eyes flashed. Yakid's eyes flashed. Truth? You want truth? Shahanshah is not your enemy. He is only the mirror. He shows you what you are. He shows you that you are all conquerors wearing prayer as perfume. Faladios roared and slammed forward, shield bashing Yakid, sending him stumbling. Yakid nearly fell into the ravine, stones skittering down into darkness. Orhan Sahib stepped from the trees then, voice like judgment. Enough. Both men froze. Faladios mid-breath, Yakid mid-smile. Yakid turned slowly, and his expression settled into something like reverence twisted into mockery. Orhan Sahib, he said, inclining his head, oh, so the lion comes to watch the dogs tear each other. Orhan stepped out beside Orhan, blade ready. Speak carefully, traitor. Yakid's gaze slid to Orhan. Ah, the shield that thinks itself a man. Orhan's grip tightened, but Orhan lifted a hand, restraining him with authority alone. Orhan Sahib looked at Yakid as one looks at a wound that has festered too long. Why? Yakid spread his wounded arm slightly, blood dripping. Why? Because I saw what you are building. A realm where only your voice becomes law. You speak of justice, but justice in the hands of one man becomes a blade without a sheath. Orhan Sahib's voice lowered. And so you chose Shahanshah? A ruler whose tongue is a snake? Yakid's eyes hardened. I chose survival. I chose the winning side. Palladio spat. There is no winning side for a man without honor. Yakid looked back at Faladios and something cruel moved behind his eyes. Honor, the last refuge of men who cannot see the board beneath the pieces. Orhan Sahib stepped closer, the ravine wind tugging at his cloak. You sold your brothers. Yakid's smile vanished. Brothers? I had no brothers. I had competitors. The air seemed to tighten. Orhan Sahib's voice became a vow. By Allah, the most just, you will answer for every door you open to slaughter. If you had come to me with grievance, I would have heard you, but you came with knives and fire. Yakid raised his blade slightly. Then hear me now with steel. Faladios moved instantly, but Orhan's hand shot out, stopping him again. This is not yours alone, Orhan said. Though this betrayal is against all. Yakid's eyes flicked from Orhan to Faladios. He measured distances, angles, chances. A man like him always counts. Then from the darkness beyond the clearing, an arrow hissed, aimed not at Orhan but at Yakid. Orhan's reflex was lightning. He snapped his shield up, intercepting the arrow mid-flight. It struck and splintered. All heads turned. A second arrow came, then a third, and this time they were aimed at Orhan Sahib. Orhan stepped in front of Orhan, absorbing one arrow into his shield and twisting aside as another grazed the edge. He growled, Archers! From the trees, enemy soldiers emerged. Shahanshah's hidden guard. The duel had been bait. The confrontation had been a net. Yakid had not come alone. He had come with a plan, and Shahanshah's desperation had turned the forest into a stage where betrayal could wear many faces. Yakid laughed, blood on his teeth. You see, even now the king's hand reaches. Faladios surged toward Yakid, but Yakid darted back toward the approaching soldiers, using them as moving walls. Orhan Sahib's voice rose above the sudden chaos. Put Orhan with me, Faladios, do not lose him. They fought again, but now it was not duel, it was slaughter in close quarters. Swords met in tight spaces. Men collided, grappled, stabbed. The ravine edge made every step a risk. A soldier slipped, screamed, and the scream dropped away into the black below. Orhan moved like a guardian angel made of steel, blocking arrows, cutting down attackers who tried to reach Orhan. Orhan fought with deliberate ferocity, striking not in frenzy but with purpose, each cut a command. Faladios pursued Yakid through the melee, his eyes locked. He cut down one soldier, then another, shoving through bodies, shoulder checking a man into a tree, then driving his blade into the man's gut without stopping. Yakid moved backward, retreating toward a narrow path that led down to the ravine's lower trail. He shouted something in a language of signal, and more soldiers appeared, forming a corridor for him. Orhan Sahib realized the truth in that instant. This was not merely an attempt to kill him. This was an attempt to pull him away from his main force, to isolate him in the ravine, to end the commander while his men waited at the burned grove. Orhan! Orhan shouted. We are being drawn. Orhan's eyes flicked, understanding. Then we cut the rope. Orhan raised his voice toward Faladios. Faladios! Do not chase into the ravine. But Faladios, hearing only the drum of his own fury, lunged after Yakid. He will not escape. Yakid glanced back and smiled, then slipped down the path like a serpent. Faladios followed. Orhan Sahib cursed under his breath, not as a man cursing fate, but as a man cursing the cost of loyalty when it becomes obsession. After him, Orhan commanded, and they descended. The ravine trail was narrow, slick with moss. The air grew colder. The sound of water grew louder. Above, the forest fire's glow flickered through branches like distant hellfire. Below, darkness waited. Shahanshah's men tried to collapse the path behind them with rolling stones. A boulder tumbled, and Turhan shoved Orhan aside, the rock crashing where Orhan's foot had been. Pebbles sprayed. Turhan's shoulder slammed against the cliff wall, but he did not slow. Why Allah? Turhan hissed. So they mean to bury us alive. Orhan's voice was tight. They mean to bury more than our bodies. They mean to bury our authority. As they reached a lower shelf, the path widened slightly into a rocky basin beside the rushing stream. Mist rose off the water, making the world ghostly. Their torchlight flickered. Shahanshah's soldiers stood in a loose semicircle, and in the center, Yaqid, breathing hard, blood still leaking from his shoulder, eyes bright with triumph. Falladio stood opposite him, blade raised, chest heaving, his silhouette carved from rage. When Orhan and Turhan arrived, the soldiers shifted, uncertain. Now the prey had become too many teeth to easily swallow. Yaqid spoke loudly, addressing the soldiers as much as the men before him. Behold Orhan Sahib, he called. See how he comes to the ravine where kings and commanders fall alike. Shahanshah promised reward for his head. Who among you will claim it? A murmur moved through the soldiers, greed and fear wrestling. Orhan Sahib stepped forward, ignoring the water spray on his boots, ignoring the ache in his side. His voice came out calm, and that calm was more terrifying than shouting. You speak of reward, Orhan said to Yaqid, was if your soul can be weighed like silver. You call men to kill for coin, and you call that wisdom. But every coin carries the face of the one who minted it. Shahanshah's coin carries deceit. Take it, and you will spend your life in betrayal until betrayal spends you. Yaqid's smile faltered for the first time. Oh, spare me sermons. You came to fight. Orhan Sahib lifted his blade. I came to end what you began. Falladios advanced one step. He is mine. Orhan's eyes flicked to Falladios. Do not let him choose the ground. Yaqid raised his blade and gestured. Then choose quickly, because more of Shahanshah's men come, and when they arrive, Orhan Sahib, even Turhan's shield will not be enough. At that moment, a torch flew from behind Yaqid's line and landed near a pool of oil hidden among rocks prepared in advance. The oil ignited with a whoosh, flames leaping up, cutting off part of the basin. Smoke rose, thick and choking. Shahanshah's men had prepared fire even here, as if the very element had sworn allegiance to desperation. The turning point came in flame and suffocation. The semicircle of soldiers broke shape, some stepping back from fire, others pushing forward in panic. Their formation dissolved. Orhan Sahib saw it and acted instantly. Now, strike through before they reform. Turhan charged shoulder first, slamming into a soldier, knocking him into another, creating a gap. He cut downward, then upward, blade flashing wet in torchlight. Damir Khan was not here, Mustafa not here, but Orhan's authority did not require numbers, only precision. Orhan drove into the gap beside Turhan, cutting a man's spear shaft, then driving his blade into the man's throat. He pushed forward, breath steady despite smoke. Behind them, Falladios surged again toward Yaqid. And there, in the middle of firelight and water mist, the duel resumed, not in a quiet clearing now, but amid chaos, where men screamed and flames roared and the stream hissed as embers fell into it. Falladios attacked with brutal simplicity, each strike meant to break Yaqid's guard. Yaqid, wounded, was faster in mind than body now. He parried, but his injured shoulder betrayed him. His blade dipped a fraction, and Falladios' edge kissed his forearm, opening it. Blood flowed freely. Yaqid grimaced, then fainted low and snapped his blade upward toward Falladios' face. Faladios leaned back, the edge slicing air, and he responded with a thrust that forced Yakid to stumble into the smoke. For a heartbeat, Yakid vanished. Then he emerged to Faladios' left, moving like a man who had rehearsed this. He lunged and drove his blade toward Faladios' ribs. Faladios twisted at the last instant, the blade biting into armor and scraping bone. Pain flashed across Faladios' face, but his hands did not falter. He grabbed Yakid's wrist, locking it, pulling him close. Their faces were inches apart, lit by flame. Faladios spoke through clenched teeth. "This is the end of your bargains." Yakid breathed a laugh, weak and spiteful. "There is no end, only exchange." Yakid tried to pull back, but Faladios held him like a judgment that would not release. Faladios raised his own blade to strike, and then from the side an enemy soldier rushed Faladios with a spear. Orhan Sahib saw it. He shouted, "Faladios!" Too late, Turan reacted like a thrown dagger. He sprinted, leapt, and smashed his shield into the spear shaft, deflecting it. The spear glanced, tearing across Turan, leaving a long red line. Torhan landed hard, then chopped the soldier down with one clean blow. Faladios, distracted, lost his grip for a heartbeat. Yakid tore free and staggered back, breathing hard, blood pouring from multiple wounds now, but his eyes still alive with that poisonous will. Orhan Sahib advanced, smoke curling around him. "You see, Yakid, even your traps cannot silence what you have awakened." Yakid's voice grew sharper, almost pleading, but not for mercy, for recognition. "You do not understand the world you are building. Shahanshah does. He knows men will kneel only to fear." Orhan Sahib's eyes burned. "Men kneel to Allah alone. They stand with courage when they remember that." Yakid spat blood. "Then stand. Let us see whose faith holds." The soldiers around them hesitated, caught between fear of Orhan and fear of Shahanshah. The fire made their shadows jump like guilty thoughts. In that hesitation, Orhan Sahib turned the battle into psychological war. He raised his voice so it carried over flame and water. "Who among you was promised reward? Hear me. Shahanshah's promises are smoke, but Allah's justice is not smoke. Drop your weapons and you will live. Continue and you will die in this ravine, nameless, unclaimed." A few soldiers tightened their grips, uncertain. One looked at Yakid, then at Orhan, then at the fire behind him. Another stepped back, eyes wide as if waking from a spell. Yakid sensed it and shouted, "Do not listen. He will slaughter you once you kneel." Orhan Sahib answered immediately, voice like a seal on an oath, "By the most merciful, I do not slaughter those who surrender, but I do slaughter those who betray and murder." That line struck deeper than steel. Two soldiers lowered their weapons. A third followed. The semicircle cracked, not by force, but by truth spoken with authority. Yakid's face twisted. "You poison them with words." Orhan Sahib stepped closer. "Words are lighter than swords, and yet they decide where swords fall." Yakid, cornered now by fire, water, and the slow collapse of his borrowed support, looked to the narrow path behind him, the only escape. Faladios moved to block it. Torhan, bleeding from his arm, held his stance beside Urhan like a wall with breath. For a moment, time slowed, and the whole ravine seemed to hold its breath. Yakid suddenly threw a small pouch at the fire, powder spilled, flaring bright. The flame burst upward, and smoke thickened into a blinding veil. Men coughed, stumbled, cursed. In that instant of confusion, Yakid darted toward the stream, leaping across slick stones, splashing water, using mist as cover. Faladios roared and chased, slipping once, recovering, his boots splashing. Orhan Sahib followed, but carefully. He would not be pulled into drowning for the sake of rage. Torhan stayed slightly behind and to the side, scanning for arrows, for hidden blades, for the next betrayal. Yakid reached the far bank where reeds grew tall. He shoved through them, vanishing into a narrow channel that led out of the basin. Faladios crashed into the reeds after him, cutting them aside with his blade, fury guiding him more than sight. Orhan Sahib arrived at the reeds just in time to see Faladios disappear into the channel after Yakid. "Faladio!" Orhan shouted. Orhan, do not chase alone. Only the rustle of reeds answered. Orhan's voice was strained. He will not return until one of them falls. Orhan Sahib's gaze hardened. Then we go, but we go with sense. The enemy wants us separated. As they pushed into the narrow channel, the world tightened again. Reeds towered, whispering. Water sucked at boots. The air smelled of wet earth and smoke. The fire's glow was behind them now, and ahead lay darkness shaped like a throat. Then, suddenly, the reeds exploded outward as men sprang from hiding, Shahanshah's reinforcements arriving just as Yaqut promised. Spears thrust, blades swung, arrows fired from close range. Orhan threw himself in front of Orhan again, catching an arrow on his shield, then another that struck and lodged. He grunted, muscles shaking under impact. Orhan fought back to back with him, cutting spearheads aside, stepping into an attacker's space, breaking his balance, killing him with a short thrust. Water churned with blood. Reeds fell like severed hair. Somewhere ahead, Faladio's voice roared again, then cut off in a harsh gasp. Orhan's heart jolted. Faladios! They forced forward, carving through attackers. Orhan's arm bled steadily now, but his eyes remained clear, feral. He intercepted a spear meant for Orhan, snapping the shaft with a twist, then slammed his sword into the attacker's collarbone. Finally, they burst into a small open patch where the channel widened into a muddy bank beneath a rock overhang. There, Faladio stood on one knee, breathing hard, his hand pressed to his side where Yaqut's earlier strike had found him. Blood seeped between his fingers, and in front of him stood Yaqut, swaying, wounded but still standing, blade trembling in his grip. His face was pale in the faint light, eyes glittering with that same cool intellect. Faladios lifted his head, eyes blazing. You cannot run forever. Yaqut's voice was hoarse now. I do not need forever, only long enough. Orhan Sahib stepped forward, blade raised. Orhan came beside him, shield up, arrows still lodged like dark feathers. Yaqut looked at them both, then beyond them, as if listening for something only he could hear. Then, faint but growing, came the sound of drums. Not Orhan's drums, Shahanshah's drums. They echoed through the ravine and the forest above, steady, relentless, like the heartbeat of an approaching army. The sound carried with it a promise, more soldiers, more fire, more steel. Shahanshah was not content with ambushes anymore. He was moving openly now, forced by desperation to gamble everything. Yaqut smiled through blood. Hear that? The king comes. The night is not yours, Orhan Sahib. It belongs to the crown. Orhan Sahib's eyes narrowed, and his voice carried the weight of history. No night belongs to any crown. It belongs to Allah. And Allah gives victory to whom He wills. Yaqut's smile twitched. Then will He give it to you? Orhan Sahib did not answer with words. He stepped forward, and the men around them, enemy soldiers still lingering at the edges, uncertain, frightened by the drums and the fire, watched as the commander closed the distance. Faladios tried to rise, but his wound pulled him down again. Orhan shifted, ready to strike if Yaqut lunged. Yaqut's blade lifted, but his arm shook. His strength was leaking away with every heartbeat. Still, his eyes refused to surrender. Orhan Sahib spoke quietly now, as if speaking not to Yaqut's ears but to his soul. You chose betrayal as a road. This is where it ends. Alone, hunted, surrounded by men you tried to use. I offered you brotherhood once. I offer you one last chance now. Drop your weapon. Face judgment. If you have any remaining faith, do not make your final breath a lie. Yaqut's lips parted, and for a fraction of a moment, something like doubt flickered, then vanished beneath pride. Judgment? He rasped. Your judgment? I would rather die than kneel to your order. Orhan Sahib's voice became iron. Then you choose your consequence. Before Orhan could step again, a sharp whistle cut the air. An arrow from the darkness aimed true. Orhan moved, but even he could not be everywhere at once. The arrow did not fly toward Orhan, it flew toward Yakid. It struck Yakid in the chest. Yakid's eyes widened, not in pain alone, but in disbelief. Betrayed by the very side he chose, he staggered, looking down at the shaft protruding from his armor. His mouth opened and blood bubbled at his lips. From the shadows beneath the rock overhang, a figure emerged, a soldier bearing Shahanshah's mark on his cloak, bow still raised, face hard. Yakid stared at him. You? The soldier's voice was cold. Shahanshah senses forgiveness. Dead men keep secrets. Wait, laughter choking in his throat. He fell to his knees in mud and water, his blade slipping from his hand. He looked up at Orhan Sahib, eyes glassy, and whispered, You see? This is the world. Use, discard, even kings. Orhan Sahib stepped closer, looking down at the dying traitor. And still you chose them? Yakid, his breath rattled. I chose myself. Falladio, still kneeling, reached forward, gripping his sword as if to finish what fate began, but Orhan raised a hand. No, no, Orhan said, voice low but absolute. Allah has written his end. Do not stain your hand further. Yakid's eyes fluttered, and in his final moment, the arrogance that had armored him seemed to crack, revealing only fear beneath. He whispered something broken, half prayer, half regret. Then his head slumped, and the mud received him without ceremony. The drums grew louder. The Shahanshah's soldier who had fired the arrow stepped back into shadow, disappearing before Orhan could reach him. The message was clear. Shahanshah would rather kill his own traitor than allow Orhan to question him, to extract truths, to expose plans. Orhan Sahib looked at Yakir's body, then lifted his gaze toward the direction of the drums. Smoke from the forest fire drifted overhead like a dark banner. The ravine wind carried ash. Somewhere above, the old stone bridge waited, still contested, still strategic, still vital. Orhan's voice was tied with urgency. Sahib, the enemy approaches in force. Falladios tried again to rise, teeth clenched. Let me stand, let me fight. Orhan Sahib crouched beside him, gripping his shoulder. You will live, Falladios. By Allah, you will not die in reeds while Shahanshah marches. Falladios' eyes burned. He escaped consequence. Orhan's gaze turned grave. No, he met it, not by our blade, but by the blade of the master he served. Let it be a lesson carved into every heart. Betrayal buys only betrayal. Orhan Sahib stood and looked at Orhan. We withdraw from the ravine. We return to our men. We take the stone bridge before dawn, and then we cut Shahanshah's supply lines until his crown sits on a starving head. Orhan nodded, blood dripping from his arm into the water. As you will. Orhan Sahib raised his voice to the few enemy soldiers still hovering, uncertain and shaken by what they had witnessed. You saw what Shahanshah does to his own. Surrender now and live. Follow him, and you will be discarded like Yakid. A few dropped their weapons immediately, eyes wide, trembling. Others fled into the reeds, choosing darkness over allegiance. Orhan Sahib turned away from Yakid's corpse, not with pity, not with triumph, but with the grim acceptance of a man who knows history is written in bodies as much as ink. They carried Falladios between them, Orhan supporting one side despite his wounded arm, Orhan supporting the other despite the cut on his ribs. Step by step, they moved back through the channel, back toward the basin, back toward the climb. Behind them, the drums continued, steady as doom. As they ascended, the forest fire's glow had dimmed, but smoke still hung in the branches like the ghost of a battle that refused to leave. The burned grove crackled softly, embers glowing beneath ash. Orhan's men waited there, tense, weapons ready, eyes searching the dark for their commander. When Orhan Sahib emerged from the smoke carrying Falladios, a murmur ran through them, relief, anger, hunger for vengeance. Damir Khan stepped forward. Sahib, we heard drums. Scouts confirm Shahanshah moves with a larger host. He means to push through the bridge and crush us between forest and river. Orhan Sahib's eyes swept over his men, counting, measuring. He saw exhaustion. He saw soot-streaked faces. He saw grief. He saw also the stubborn light that does not die easily. He spoke loudly enough for all to hear, his voice carrying over the crackle of embers. Tonight we were ambushed. Tonight they tried to burn us, divide us, bury us in a ravine. And by Allah's permission, we still stand. Yaqid is dead, not by our mercy, not by our plea, but by Shahanshah's own hand. That is the king you face. A king who devours even those who serve him. A low growl of hatred rose among the men. Orhan Sahib lifted his blade toward the north. We do not flee. We do not scatter. We move before dawn. We take the stone bridge. We fortify it. We deny Shahanshah the crossing. We cut his supply wagons on the eastern road with Zarkan scouts. We send Tamir Buga with riders to harass his rear. We make the river his wall, not ours. Mustafa stepped forward, eyes bright. And if he brings siege engines? Orhan Sahib's answer was immediate. Then we break them before they breathe fire. If he builds towers, we burn them. If he brings rams, we drown them in the river. If he believes numbers alone grant victory, we teach him what discipline and faith can do against arrogance. Abdul Rahman raised his hands and recited a short invocation, voice trembling with fervor. Men answered softly, some weeping, some smiling without joy, all tightening their grips. Turhan leaned close to Urhan, voice low. Shahanshah will not stop. He is cornered. He will throw everything. Orhan Sahib stared into the north, where darkness began to thin with the earliest hint of dawn's grey. Yes, he murmured. Cornered beast bite deepest. Damer Khan approached again. What of Faladios? He bleeds. Orhan Sahib looked at Faladios lying on a cloak, eyes half closed, jaw clenched. Bind him. Keep him warm. He will ride when he can. He is needed. Faladios' eyes opened and his voice came out rough. Oh, do not wait for me. Orhan leaned down. We do not leave our commanders to die in mud. Rest. Heal. You will have your war. Faladios' lips tightened, but he nodded faintly. As the night finally began to loosen its grip, Orhan Sahib gathered his captains near the edge of the burnt grove where smoke thinned enough to breathe. He spoke quickly, strategically, each order a stone placed carefully. Mustafa, you take the vanguard to the bridge now before the light gives our movement away. Damir Khan, you follow with the main body and secure the western bank. Mahmud, count arrows and redistribute. Our archers must not run dry. Altuddin Sahib, take men into the forest flank. Watch for Shahanshah's scouts and cut them down silently. Zarkan and Kulads ride east and find the supply wagons. Burn them. Leave none. Kilal, you will carry my words to every unit. No one breaks formation. No one chases fleeing men beyond the line. We win with discipline, not hunger. They obeyed, dispersing like limbs moved by one mind. Orhan Sahib remained for a moment alone with Turhan and Abdul Rahman. The air tasted of ash. Somewhere a raven called. Abdul Rahman spoke softly. Sahib, you spared Faladios the stain of killing Yaqid. That was wisdom. Orhan Sahib's face was unreadable. Yaqid's death does not end betrayal. It only changes its face. Turhan's gaze was distant, fixed on the direction of the drums. Shahanshah killed him to silence him. Orhan nodded. Yes. Which means Yaqid knew something worth silencing. Turhan's voice lowered further. Then Shahanshah's plan is deeper than ambush. Orhan's eyes narrowed and he felt the cold hand of foreknowledge brush his spine. He will try to take the bridge, yes, but he will also try something else. A betrayal among us, perhaps? A gate opened. A captain turned. He has lost subtlety, but desperation can still be clever. Turhan's hand tightened around his sword. Name the one you suspect. Orhan Sahib did not answer quickly. He watched his men move through smoke and grey dawn, watched them lift wounded onto horses, watched them extinguish embers that clung to cloaks. He listened to the distant drums and the nearer sound of his own army's breath. I suspect no one, Orhan said at last. And that is why I am afraid, because Shahanshah does not stop sending snakes simply because one snake dies. Turan nodded once, accepting the weight of that. Then they mounted and rode toward the stone bridge, the road ahead damp and scarred, the forest behind them still smoking as if the night refused to let go of its prey. The dawn did not come like mercy. It came like a witness, pale and stern, showing the world what had been done under darkness. As they approached the bridge, they saw it, ancient stones spanning the river like a spine. Mist rose from the water. On the far side, shadows moved. Enemy scouts already there, watching, waiting. The drums grew louder, now joined by the faint metallic groan of wagons and the murmur of an army that had not yet shown its full face. Orhan Sahib raised his hand and his men halted behind him, silent, poised. He stared at the bridge, then at the far bank, then at the mist that hid what lay beyond. His voice came out like a vow carved into stone. In the name of Allah, we take that crossing, we do not yield it. If Shahanshah wants to enter our lands, he will wade through the river of his own dead. Orhan lifted his shield, arrows still embedded, as if carrying the night's memory into the day. Command and we strike. Orhan Sahib's gaze remained fixed forward, but in his mind the ravine still whispered and Yakil's last look still flickered like a dying ember. He felt the shape of the next battle pressing close, felt the unseen hand of the next betrayal hovering somewhere within the mist. Then he spoke quietly so only those nearest could hear. Shahanshah is coming, and he is not coming alone. And as the first hoof stepped onto the stone bridge, as mist curled around steel, as the drums beat closer like a heart preparing to burst, Orhan Sahib felt history lean forward, hungry, relentless, because the war had not ended in the forest and it would not end at the river and somewhere ahead. In the smoke of the next siege, another name was already being sharpened into betrayal.
The first hoof struck the stone, and the bridge answered with a dull ancient sound, as if it remembered every army that had crossed it and did not care which banner came next. Mist curled over the parapets like pale cloth laid upon a corpse, and the river below moved with a steady cold voice, untroubled by kings and commanders, whispering that all blood becomes water in the end. Orhan Sahib rode at the front, but he did not ride as a man chasing glory. He rode as a man carrying a verdict. Behind him, the vanguard tightened into shape beneath Mustafa's hard gaze, shields forward, spears angled, boots and hooves muffled by the damp. Tarhan was slightly ahead and to the side, shield raised, eyes searching the far bank where shadows shifted like lies trying to become bodies. The enemy scouts were there, yes, but they were not confident. They moved as if the mist itself belonged to Orhan Sahib and could betray them with a sudden clearing. Some held bows but did not draw. Some held spears but did not advance. They were watching for the flood of Shahanshah's main host, watching for the moment when numbers would give courage to their trembling hands. Orhan Sahib lifted his arm and the column slowed, then halted, the silence settling so suddenly that the clink of a ring on a gauntlet sounded like thunder. He stared across the bridge into the fog, and he spoke as if addressing the unseen army itself. In the name of Allah the Most Knowing, you will not take this crossing with tricks and smoke. Come with your faces shown, if you have faces worthy of daylight. Tarhan leaned in, voice low. They will not show, not yet. Mustafa's jaw tightened. Then we take the far bank before they gather. Orhan Sahib's eyes remained fixed forward. We take it, yes, but we take it with the thought of what follows. The bridge is not the battle, it is the throat. Whoever holds it decides which army breathes. He raised his hand again, and Mustafa moved. A wedge of men advanced at a measured pace, shields overlapping, spearpoints peering out like the teeth of a disciplined beast. The mist swallowed their legs, then their waists, then their chests, until only the dark crowns of helmets and the glimmer of steel remained visible. Then the first arrow hissed from the far bank, cutting through fog. It struck a shield and skittered off, clattering on stone. A second arrow followed, then a third, not in a storm but in a testing rhythm, probing shots, seeking weakness, trying to provoke a rash charge. Tarhan stepped forward, catching an arrow on the edge of his shield with a sharp crack, then he pointed with his blade. Left parapet, 2 bows. Orhan Sahib's voice cut through the hush. Mahmud, archers, answer them. Mahmud's men moved up behind the shield wedge, bows rising in silent unison. They fired into the mist, not wildly but with knowledge of angles, of distance measured in heartbeats. A cry rose from the far bank, short and surprised, then cut off. The enemy scouts shifted back, their confidence thinning. Orhan Sahib did not allow them time to recover. Advance, take the bank, no pursuit beyond sight. The river is our ally only if we do not drown in our own hunger. The wedge pushed forward, steel scraped stone, boots thudded, mist parted in ragged strips. At the far end of the bridge, shapes emerged, enemy scouts with pale eyes and damp cloaks trying to hold for just a few breaths longer. The clash was sudden and intimate. A spear thrust met a shield, a sword swung and caught a helmet rim, sending sparks. Men grunted, shoved, cursed prayers through clenched teeth. The edge of the bridge left no room for wide formations. Every step was a promise of falling into the river's cold mouth. Tarhan moved into the crush like a wedge of iron, striking not with show but with necessity. He hooked an enemy's spear aside, stepped in, and drove his blade under the man's ribs. The man sagged, and Tarhan used the falling body as cover against another incoming strike. He was bleeding from earlier, but he fought as if pain were a distant rumor. Orhan Sahib stayed just behind the first line, directing, striking when needed, never allowing himself to be pulled into the river of chaos. He saw a young soldier hesitate at the parapet edge, fear of falling overtaking fear of the enemy, and Orhan's voice steadied him like a hand on the shoulder. "Do not look down, look forward, your feet belong to Allah." The soldier blinked, nodded, and held. Within moments the scouts broke, some falling back into the misted bank, others dropping weapons and raising empty hands. Orhan Sahib's men wanted to run them down, to cleanse the far side with blood, to make the bridge a monument of corpses. But Orhan lifted his blade and shouted a single word that struck like a whip. "Hold it." The line froze, breathing hard, eyes wild. Orhan Sahib stepped forward to the surrendered men, their hands trembling, their lips moving with half-formed pleas. "Throw your weapons into the river," he commanded. They obeyed, blades clinking on stone, then splashing into water below. The river took them without comment. Orhan Sahib's voice lowered, carrying the kind of promise men remember. "You will live if you speak truth. Where is Shahanshah's host? How many? How soon?" One scout swallowed, eyes darting. Behind the ridge road, many wagons, engines. He comes at dawn's full face. Another spoke quickly, as if words could buy life. "He sends riders to the east track. He fears his supply." Orhan Sahib's gaze hardened. "He fears because we will make him hungry." He turned to Kilal. "Send word to Zarkin and Kulads. If they have not yet found the wagons, tell them Shahanshah's bloodline depends on them. Let the east road burn." Kilal bowed and ran, vanishing into mist like a thought released. Mustafa approached, breathing hard. "Bank is ours." Orhan Sahib nodded. "Then we turn it into a wall." Damir Khan arrived with the main body, his face like carved stone, eyes already reading the terrain. Jarkata Sahib's rear guard took positions, scanning the near side for pursuit. Tamir Boga supervised the wounded and brought Faladios forward on a litter, his jaw clenched, eyes furious even through pain. Faladios' voice rasped bitter. "We stand here while Shahanshah gathers." Orhan Sahib met his gaze. "We stand here because if we lose this bridge, we lose the shape of the war." Faladios' eyes burned, and Yakid lies dead with secrets in his mouth. Orhan Sahib's expression did not soften. "Then we will tear secrets from Shahanshah's own hands." He walked to the far bank's rise and looked outward. The land beyond was a shallow valley with scrub and scattered trees, then a ridge road where the enemy would appear. There were old ruins on the left, collapsed stonework, perhaps from a forgotten watchpost, and on the right, reeds and wet ground leading back to the river's curve. The bridge was the only clean crossing for leagues. Orhan Sahib's mind arranged men like stones in a fortress. "Damir Khan," he said, "take men and seize those ruins, put archers there. I want the ridge road watched and bled." Damir Khan nodded. "It will be done." "Mustafa," Orhan continued, "you hold the bridge head with shields and spears. If they push, you become the door that does not open." Mustafa struck his fist to his chest. "By Allah, they will break upon us." "Altadin Sahib," Orhan said, "take a small force into the right wet ground. Hide. When their front presses the bridge, you strike their flank, not before." Altadin Sahib's eyes narrowed, pleased by the cruelty of patience. "They will not see me until they taste my blade." "Mahmud," Orhan said, "keep arrows dry. Fire only when you can see eyes, not shadows." Mahmud bowed his head. "As you command." "Abdul Rahman," Orhan said, "walk the line, give them verses, give them courage. The heart is a weapon too." Abdul Rahman's voice was steady. "Allah is with the steadfast." Then Orhan Sahib turned to Tarhan and his voice lowered so only Tarhan could hear. Find me the shape of their command. Shahanshah will not come without a spearhead. There will be a champion, a captain, a man meant to break our front by fear alone. Tarhan's eyes gleamed. I will find him. As the morning light grew stronger, the mist began to thin and the world sharpened into cruel clarity. Smoke from the burned grove still trailed the sky behind them, a dark smear on dawn's pale face. The river hissed softly. The bridge waited. And then from beyond the ridge road came the sound that turns men's stomachs into stone. Drums. Not distant now, near enough to feel through the soles of boots. A steady pounding like a giant heartbeat approaching to crush smaller hearts into silence. Shahanshah's host crested the ridge like a wave of metal and cloth. Standards rose, dark banners with harsh symbols. Spears bristled, shields flashed. The line was deep, more men than a quick ambush force, more men than a night raid. Wagons rolled behind them with the dull groan of wood and iron, and among those wagons, long shapes covered in canvas hinted at siege engines, rams' ladders, perhaps even a small tower meant for some future wall. Shahanshah had come not merely to fight, he had come to end. Orhan Sahib stood still as the enemy advanced toward the valley, and he felt the weight of every man behind him watching his posture, drawing courage from the way he refused to move like prey. Then above the drums a horn sounded, long and arrogant. From the enemy line rode a figure forward into the valley, a heavy rider in ornate armor, helm crowned with a thin gold ridge, horse barded in dark cloth. He stopped at a distance where voices could carry. Tarhan's eyes narrowed. There, that is their spearhead. The rider raised an arm, and a herald's voice rang out. Orhan Sahib, Shahanshah, ruler by destiny, offers you mercy. Lay down your arms, withdraw from the bridge, and you may keep your lives as tenants beneath his crown. A murmur ran through Orhan's men, anger, disgust. Orhan Sahib took a step forward, alone, his cloak fluttering, his blade sheathed for the moment as a sign that he did not tremble. He called back, his voice strong enough to carry across water and stone. Tell Shahanshah his mercy is a knife hidden in silk. We do not kneel to thieves who call themselves kings. This bridge is not his to command. It belongs to Allah's decree and to those who defend it with honor. The enemy rider laughed, the sound sharp. Honor, your honor burned last night in the forest smoke. Orhan Sahib's gaze cut like ice. Last night your king killed his own servant to silence him. That is Shahanshah's honor. The valley seemed to pause. The enemy rider's posture stiffened slightly, a flicker of unease. Orhan Sahib continued, letting the truth strike like stones. Yaqi died by your king's arrow. Tell that to your men. Tell them their reward is the same. A ripple moved through the enemy ranks behind the rider. Men shifted, heads turned. Fear is a contagion when it touches truth. The rider's voice rose angrily. Lies. Orhan Sahib answered with a single sentence spoken like an oath. By Allah, it is truth. He turned and walked back to his line without haste, and that calm was a weapon sharper than any spear, because it told both armies that Orhan Sahib did not bargain with desperation. Shahanshah's line advanced. The first wave came with shields raised, spears forward, archers behind. They moved in disciplined steps, drums guiding their feet. Shahanshah had learned that a scattered army breaks like rotten wood. He came with structure now. Hold, Mustafa commanded, his voice hoarse. Let them come, let them press, then we bite. Arrows flew, Mahmud's men answered, their shafts cutting air with a dark hiss. A man fell near the enemy front, clutching his throat. Another staggered, arrow in eye, dropping like a puppet cut from strings. But the enemy kept moving, stepping over bodies as if bodies were merely stones on the road. Then they reached the bridge head. The crash of shield on shield rang out, harsh and echoing, and the bridge became a throat choking on iron. Men shoved forward, spears jabbing over shoulders, swords stabbing into gaps. The parapets trapped them, making the fight a brutal pressing mass where strength and discipline mattered more than elegance. Mustafa's line held, shields locked, spears thrusting in short deadly bursts. Damir Khan's archers in the ruins loosed arrows into the enemy's left side, cutting down men who thought themselves safe in the press. The enemy responded with their own archers, shooting high arcs toward the ruins. Stone chipped. A man screamed and fell backward, arrow buried in his neck. Damir Khan did not flinch. He simply kicked the corpse aside and ordered another to take the position. War does not pause for grief. Tarhan moved along the line, intercepting arrows when they found Orhan's position, stepping into gaps where shields wavered, striking down any enemy who forced his way too close. Once an enemy spear slipped through and aimed at Orhan's ribs, Tarhan's sword flashed, cutting the spearhead off mid-thrust, then his shield slammed into the attacker's face, breaking teeth with a sound like cracking walnuts. Orhan Sahib watched the enemy's rhythm. He watched how they pressed in waves, how they tried to tire the defenders, how they sent heavier men to the front. Hopping weight would do what courage could not. He watched also the wagons behind their line, how they were positioned, how they were guarded more than ordinary supplies. Shahanshah feared hunger, yes, but he also feared something else, the loss of his engines, his tools for ending sieges quickly. The king was thinking ahead. So Orhan Sahib thought ahead further. He leaned toward Killil, who had returned breathless. "Where are Zarkin and Kulads?" Killil swallowed. "East Road, Sahib." They struck a wagon train. Fire was seen. Smoke rose. Orhan Sahib nodded once. "Good, let Shahanshah taste emptiness." Then he turned to Tamir Boga. "Take 40 riders, circle through the right wet ground behind Altadin Sahib's hidden men. When you hear my shout, you strike their wagons, not their front, their belly." Tamir Boga's eyes sharpened. "Through the marsh." Orhan Sahib's voice was firm. "Through whatever Allah placed between us and victory." Tamir Boga bowed and moved, gathering men quickly, their horses snorting as they were led into the damp reeds. The bridge battle intensified. The enemy shoved harder, their front line thickening. Bodies piled near the parapets. Blood-slicked stone, turning footing treacherous. A man slipped and fell between shields. Feet trampled him before anyone could pull him free. Abdul Rahman walked behind the line, voice steady in recitation, and men who felt their arms weakening tightened their grip again as if the words themselves became muscle. Then Shahanshah's spearhead rode forward again, closer now, and the ornate rider raised his sword, shouting, "Break them, the bridge is the crown." The enemy surged with renewed fury. Orhan Sahib's eyes locked on that rider. "There," he murmured to Tarhan, "that man carries their courage." Tarhan nodded. "Then I will cut it out." Orhan caught his arm. "Not yet. Wait for the moment when they believe they are winning, then despair will be sharper." Tarhan's jaw tightened, but he obeyed. The enemy brought forward a crude, battering device, 2 men carrying a heavy beam meant to smash into the shield wall to break the locked line. They pushed it forward like a ram without wheels, using bodies to protect it. Mustafa's line bent under the impact. Shields shuddered, arms shook, men grunted in strain. Orhan Sahib stepped forward, raising his blade. "Now." Altadin Sahib erupted from the wet ground on the right like a vengeful spirit, his men appearing from reeds and mud, striking the enemy flank with sudden brutality. Spears punched into unguarded sides. Blades hacked at legs. The enemy front line wavered, confused, their attention split between the bridge press and the new threat on their side. At the same moment, Orhan Sahib lifted his voice in a shout that carried across the bridge like thunder. "Tamir Boga, strike!" From the right reeds behind the enemy line, Tamir Boga's riders burst forth, splashing through shallow water, horses snorting, hooves throwing mud. They did not charge the bridge, they charged the wagons. Shahanshah's men guarding the wagons turned in alarm. Shouts rose. The tight structure behind the enemy front cracked as men were pulled from the bridge assault to defend supplies and engines. Tarhan saw the opening and moved without waiting for further command. He launched himself at the ornate rider, weaving through the press, shield forward, sword ready. The rider saw him and raised his blade, confident in armor, confident in distance. Tarhan closed the distance like fate closing a book. Their blades met with a violent ring. The rider was skilled, not a mere peacock. He struck with speed, trying to cut around Tarhan's shield, trying to puncture gaps. Tarhan absorbed, parried, returned strikes with cold efficiency. The fight drew eyes. Men near them hesitated as if the duel itself could decide the bridge. The rider snarled, "You are Orhan's dog." Tarhan's eyes were flat. "I am his shield." The rider lunged, aiming for Tarhan's wounded arm. Tarhan twisted, letting the blade slide along his shield rim, then stepped inside the rider's guard and slammed his shield into the man's chest. The rider staggered, breath forced out. Tarhan followed with a short thrust that punched into the gap beneath the rider's arm. The ornate armor did not save him. He gasped, eyes wide, disbelief filling them faster than blood. Tarhan leaned close, voice like a verdict. "Tell Shahanshah, arrows cannot buy loyalty." He yanked his blade free. The rider fell from his horse, collapsing on the blood-slick stone. The horse screamed and reared, then fled, knocking into men as it ran. A tremor of fear ran through the enemy line. Their spearhead was down. Their courage had been wearing that man's face. Orhan Sahib seized the moment like a commander seizing a sword dropped by the enemy. "Push," he roared, "drive them from the bridge, by Allah, drive them." Mustafa's men surged, shields forward, spears thrusting in a coordinated rhythm. Damir Khan's archers rained arrows into the enemy's now exposed side. Altadin Sahib's flank attack deepened, cutting down those trying to retreat back into the valley. The bridge became a slaughterhouse for those caught in the wrong direction. The enemy tried to regroup, to pull back in order, but panic is a fire that spreads faster than discipline can smother. Men began to retreat unevenly. Some turned too quickly, exposing backs. Some stumbled over bodies. Some jumped the parapet in desperation, hitting the river with sickening splashes, armor dragging them down like a judgment. Orhan Sahib did not allow mercy to become weakness. "Do not chase beyond the bank," he commanded even as victory rose. "Hold the crossing, let them carry fear back to Shahanshah." His men obeyed, though their blood wanted more. On the far bank, Tamir Boga's riders reached the wagons and set them alight. Torches plunged into canvas. Oil spilled. Flames rose greedily, catching on wood, licking up wheel spokes. Smoke poured into the valley, black and thick, and the enemy's rear erupted into chaos as men shouted and ran, trying to save engines, trying to form a new line, trying to hold back the sense that Allah himself had turned the day against them. The fire became the turning point, not only of battle but of spirit. Soldiers who had marched with Shahanshah's drums now saw their supplies burn. Hunger, cold, and defeat whispered their names. A king can command men to fight. He cannot command their stomachs to stay full when wagons burn. Orhan Sahib stood at the bridgehead watching the valley as smoke rose, and his eyes were sharp with understanding. "He will not withdraw," Damir Khan said, arriving with soot on his face. "A desperate king does not retreat, he throws more." Orhan Sahib nodded. "Yes, he will throw more, but now he throws from weakness." Mahmud approached, counting arrows with grim precision. "We spent much. We can hold, but not forever if he brings engines here." Orhan Sahib's gaze shifted to the burning wagons. "He will not bring engines here now, not while the belly burns." A messenger came stumbling from the ruins, one of Damir Khan's men, voice shaking. "Sahib, Shahanshah himself is seen behind the ridge line. He watches." Orhan Sahib's face tightened. The king had come close enough to taste the battle's smoke, close enough for his pride to bleed. That meant Shahanshah's desperation was no longer rumor, it was flesh. Orhan Sahib turned to Abdul Rahman. "Take a white cloth, write upon it with charcoal, 'Your servant Yaqi died by your arrow.' Send it across with one of the surrendered scouts." Abdul Rahman hesitated only a breath. This will enrage him. Orhan Sahib's voice was cold. "Good, let him rage and lose thought. Rage is a sword without direction." Abdul Rahman bowed and went. Tarhan returned to Orhan's side, breathing hard, blood drying on his forearm, eyes still burning from the duel. "The spearhead is dead." Orhan Sahib looked at him, a flicker of pride hidden under command. "And your arm?" Tarhan flexed it, pain flickering but controlled. "It obeys." Orhan Sahib's gaze moved beyond the bridge to the valley where Shahanshah's men struggled to restore order amid smoke. "Then keep it strong. This day is not ended." As the smoke thickened, Shahanshah's army pulled back slightly, regrouping behind the ridge's lower slope. They formed a defensive line around what wagons remained unburned. Men ran with buckets, with cloaks, trying to smother flames. The drums slowed, then resumed with a different rhythm, less confident, more frantic, as if the heartbeat had become irregular. Orhan Sahib did not waste the pause. He called his captains close beneath the bridge's far bank rise where arrows could not easily reach. "Listen," he said, and every face tightened. "We can hold this bridge and let Shahanshah starve, yes, but if we only hold, he will send another force around, seeking another crossing, seeking our villages, burning what we protect. A desperate king will not fight only the army, he will fight the people." Damir Khan nodded slowly. "He will strike behind." Orhan Sahib's voice sharpened. "So we do both. We hold the bridge with Mustafa and Jarkata Sahib's rear guard. The rest will move. We will cut his alternate routes. We will hunt his foragers. We will make him blind." Mustafa's eyes widened. "Split our force." Orhan Sahib's gaze was hard, not split, shape. One hand holds his throat, the other pulls his tongue out. He turned to Al-Aliaddin Sahib. "You are learned. You will read the land like scripture. Where can he cross if not here?" Al-Aladdin Sahib stepped forward, eyes thoughtful even in war. Downriver there is an old ford, shallow in summer, with enough men and planks he could make it passable. It is 2 leagues. Orhan Sahib nodded. Alauddin Sahib. Alauddin Sahib grinned like a man asked to commit holy violence. Name it. You take a force and vanish into the trees along the river, find that ford, poison it with stakes, hide archers. If he tries, he bleeds. Alauddin Sahib bowed. He will taste the river with his veins. Orhan Sahib then looked to Damir Khan. You will take riders and strike his scouts. No eyes for Shahanshah. Blind kings fall into pits. Damir Khan's voice was flat. I will bring you their eyes. Mahmud, Orhan Sahib continued, you remain here with Mustafa. Guard arrows like gold. Do not waste. Fire only to kill. Mahmud bowed. Tarhan, Orhan Sahib said quietly, you will ride with me. We go toward the ridge road, not to charge like fools, to see Shahanshah's face, to let him know we can reach him. Tarhan's expression did not change. Yes. Faladios, still lying on the cloak, forced himself up onto one elbow. His voice was rough but fierce. Do not go without me. Orhan Sahib stepped to him, lowering his voice. Your wound will open. Faladios' eyes burned. Let it. I will not lie here while kings breathe. Orhan Sahib held Faladios' gaze. He saw pride, yes, and fury, but he also saw a loyalty sharpened by pain, the kind of loyalty that does not die easily. You will not ride into open battle, Orhan Sahib said, but you will be moved to the bridgehead where men can see you still live. Your presence is strength. Faladios clenched his teeth, then nodded once, accepting command even when it denied desire. So the day shifted into a different kind of war, not a single clash but a tightening net. Mustafa and Mahmud reinforced the bridge with stones and timber from nearby scrub, creating makeshift barricades at the head. Jarkata Sahib placed men at intervals along the parapet, spears ready, eyes sharp. Abdul Rahman moved among them, steadying fear with reminders that a man's death is written already, and only his honor remains to be chosen. Damir Khan vanished with riders into the left side terrain, using the ruins and tree lines to hunt enemy scouts like wolves. Alauddin Sahib disappeared downriver. Zarkin and Kulads, already bloodied from burning wagons, rode again to ensure no hidden supply line survived. Orhan Sahib and Tarhan took a small group, tight, swift, chosen, and moved up along the edge of the valley toward the ridge where Shahanshah was said to watch. They did not ride with banners, they rode like a whisper. The ground rose, rocky and uneven. Smoke drifted across their path, carrying the smell of burned wood and cooked grain. Shahanshah's food turned to ash. In the distance, the enemy line bristled, but here the slope offered dead ground where sight was imperfect. As they climbed, Orhan Sahib felt the war's deeper layer pressing in. This was no longer about a bridge alone. This was about authority, about whether Shahanshah's crown could survive a commander who spoke truth louder than drums. They reached a point where the ridge flattened into a narrow shelf. There, through thinning smoke, Orhan Sahib saw him. Shahanshah stood surrounded by guards, his cloak heavy, his posture rigid with controlled fury. His face was not the face of a fool. It was the face of a man who had ruled long enough to believe rule was his nature, but desperation had crept into his eyes like a sickness. Orhan Sahib did not step fully into open view. He did not need to. He simply raised his voice, letting it carry. Shahanshah. The king's head snapped toward the sound. For a heartbeat, the ridge felt like a narrow bridge of its own, spanning not river but fate. Shahanshah's voice returned, sharp and cold. Orhan Sahib, you slither close. Orhan Sahib's answer was steady. I come to tell you, your wagons burn, your men see your betrayal, your servant Yaqid died by your hand. What else will you devour to keep your crown from slipping? Shahanshah laughed, but the laugh was strained. You speak of betrayal as if you are pure. Orhan Sahib's eyes narrowed. I speak of betrayal as a man who does not kill his own tools once they have served. Shahanshah's face tightened. Yaqid was a disease, I cut it out. Orhan Sahib's voice lowered, and it carried the weight of judgment. A king who calls men disease will one day call his own people disease, and when you begin cutting, you do not stop. You bleed your own realm until it is only bones. Shahanshah stepped forward a fraction, guards tensing. You think you can starve me, you think you can shame me, but I still have numbers, I still have steel. and your bridge will run red until your men beg for mercy." Tarhan shifted slightly, shield ready, as enemy archers on the ridge began to lift bows. Orhan Sahib did not flinch. "Numbers are sand, faith is stone. You can pour sand against stone until you die tired." Shahanshah's eyes flashed with hatred, "Then die tired." A guard captain shouted an order and arrows leapt from the ridge toward Orhan's small group. Tarhan sprang in front of Orhan, shield snapping up, arrows thudding into wood. One arrow struck so hard it splintered and shards flew. Orhan Sahib turned away not because he feared the king, but because he had achieved what he came for. He had shown Shahanshah that the distance between them could be crossed, that the king's safety was an illusion, that fear could climb hills. They withdrew down the slope under arrow fire, moving fast but controlled, Tarhan intercepting what he could, the rest whistling past into smoke. When they reached the valley edge again, Orhan Sahib paused, looking back once. Shahanshah stood on the ridge like a statue carved from pride, but behind that statue Orhan saw the flicker of something else, uncertainty spreading through the king's guard, whispers beginning, questions forming. A king can silence mouths, he cannot silence thoughts. They returned to the bridgehead as the afternoon leaned toward evening. The enemy had not attacked again with full force, but they had tested, probed, fired arrows, sent small groups forward to harass. Each time Mustafa's line held. Each time Mahmud's arrows answered with restraint and lethality. Each time the river carried away blood. Faladios was propped near the barricade, pale but upright, his presence like a banner of stubbornness. Men glanced at him and stood straighter, as if his refusal to die shamed their fatigue. Daimir Khan returned near sunset with a small sack. He tossed it at Orhan Sahib's feet. Inside were severed enemy scout cords, tokens torn from their uniforms, proof of blindness inflicted. Daimir Khan's voice was flat. "Their scouts no longer return, they walk into the trees and do not come out." Orhan Sahib nodded. "Good, let Shahanshah feel the forest watching." Altadin Sahib returned later, mud on his boots, eyes bright. "The downriver ford is spiked. If they cross, they will do it on their bellies. I left men hidden, patient." Orhan Sahib's gaze sharpened, and their movements. Altadin Sahib lowered his voice. "They send a force downriver, not large, testing." Orhan Sahib's mind adjusted the map again. He searches for another throat to choke. Zarkin and Kulad's returned with smoke-stained cloaks and tired horses. Zarkin's voice was rough. "We burned what remained of the east wagons, but we saw something else." Orhan Sahib's eyes narrowed. "Speak." Kulad swallowed. "A messenger rode from Shahanshah's camp toward our lands, not toward his, toward the villages behind us. He carried a sealed letter." Orhan Sahib's stomach tightened. "To whom?" Zarkin shook his head. "We could not see." He rode hard, guarded. Tarhan's voice grew low. "A letter is a knife that travels without sound." Orhan Sahib's gaze moved across his men. He thought of his captains. He thought of the fear Shahanshah would sow, not only with steel but with whispers, bribes, threats. A sealed letter meant Shahanshah had found a door. Orhan Sahib called Kilal. "Find that messenger. If he lives, bring him. If he dies, bring his letter." Kilal bowed and vanished into the dimming light. Night returned, and with it the cold truth that day victories mean little if night breeds betrayal. Fires were lit on the far bank for warmth, but they were kept low, hidden behind stones, to deny enemy archers easy targets. The bridge was guarded in shifts. Abdul Rahman prayed with men whose hands still shook from killing. Mahmud counted arrows again and again as if numbers could become comfort. Orhan Sahib sat near the barricade with Tarhan, Daimir Khan, and Al-Aliaddin Sahib. Faladios lay nearby, eyes open, listening, refusing to sleep. The river's voice never stopped. It whispered beneath everything, reminding them that time flows no matter who bleeds. Then, as the night deepened, a small commotion rose from the near side of the bridge. Footsteps hurried. A guard shouted. Another voice answered. And then Kilal appeared, breath ragged, cloak torn. He dropped to one knee before Orhan Sahib and held out a sealed letter, wax cracked, edges damp as if it had been hidden near water. "We found the messenger," Kilal rasped. "He fought like a cornered rat. He is dead." Orhan Sahib took the letter, his fingers steady. The wax seal bore Shahanshah's mark. Tarhan leaned in. "To whom is it addressed?" Orhan Sahib turned it, reading the name written in careful ink. His eyes narrowed. Al-Aliaddin Sahib. For a moment the night seemed to grow quieter, as if even the river leaned in to listen. Al-Aliaddin Sahib's face drained of color. Sahib, I. Orhan Sahib lifted a hand, silencing him not with anger but with authority. His voice was low, dangerous in its calm. You will speak after I read. He broke the seal fully and unfolded the paper. The words were written with the elegance of a king who believed ink could chain men. Shahanshah offered promises, land, titles, safety for family, a seat in a future court. He spoke of Orhan Sahib as a rising tyrant, of rebellion as righteousness, of betrayal as salvation. And at the bottom was a threat thinly veiled. Refusal would mean punishment delivered not on the battlefield but in the shadows, through villages, through kin, through fire. Orhan Sahib finished reading and folded the letter slowly, as if folding a corpse's shroud. He looked at Al-Aliaddin Sahib, and in his gaze was not immediate condemnation, but something heavier, the sorrow of leadership forced to suspect its own. Al-Aliaddin Sahib's voice trembled. By Allah, I did not answer him, I did not even know. Daimir Khan's hand drifted toward his sword hilt, eyes cold. Kings do not write without hope. Faladio's, weak but fierce, snarled, If he answers, I will cut his tongue from his mouth. Tarhan did not move, but his posture tightened, ready for whatever Orhan commanded. Orhan Sahib held the letter in one hand like a poisonous thing. Shahanshah writes to you because he thinks you can be turned. He thinks your learning makes you soft. He thinks your family makes you afraid. Al-Aliaddin Sahib swallowed hard, shame and fear wrestling in his eyes. I am afraid, he admitted, voice breaking. Not for myself, for those behind me. He knows names, he knows places. Orhan Sahib's gaze remained steady. Fear is not betrayal. What you do with fear is what will judge you. Al-Aliaddin Sahib bowed his head. Command me, Sahib, test me. Orhan Sahib's voice dropped even lower. Yes, I will. He turned to Tarhan. Double the guard. No one enters the camp unseen. Daimir Khan, send riders tonight to the villages behind us. Warn them. Move families closer to our protected routes. If Shahanshah tries to burn our people, we will not discover it after ashes speak. Daimir Khan nodded. It will be done. Orhan Sahib then looked back at Al-Aliaddin Sahib. You will write a reply. Al-Aliaddin Sahib's eyes widened. A reply. Orhan Sahib nodded. Yes, a reply with my words and yours. You will pretend to bend just enough to draw out Shahanshah's plan. We will feed him the illusion that his snake has found a crack in our wall. Faladios pushed himself up slightly, grimacing. That is dangerous. Orhan Sahib's eyes were hard. War is danger, but we choose the kind that brings us advantage. Tarhan's voice was quiet, and if Al-Aliaddin Sahib truly bends. Orhan Sahib did not look away from Al-Aliaddin Sahib. Then Allah will expose him, and we will answer. Al-Aliaddin Sahib's breath shook, but he nodded slowly. I will write, by Allah I will write as you command. Orhan Sahib handed him the letter. You will write that you are torn, that you fear for your family, that you are willing to speak, but only if Shahanshah meets you at the downriver ford with a small guard to exchange terms. Daimir Khan's eyes narrowed. A trap. Orhan Sahib nodded. A mirror. He sends traps, we return them, but with justice. Tarhan understood immediately. Altaddin Sahib's spikes, hidden archers. Orhan Sahib's gaze turned toward the dark river. Yes, if Shahanshah's desperation drives him to come himself, we cut the head. If he sends a captain, we take the captain and learn what we can. Either way, we tighten the net. The night thickened further. The reply was written under low firelight, ink trembling slightly on the page because even learned hands shake when kings threaten families. When it was done, Orhan Sahib sealed it not with wax but with a simple knot and a mark enough to appear sincere, not enough to surrender dignity. He handed it to Killil. You will deliver this in disguise, you will not be seen returning. Killil bowed, eyes fierce. By Allah, I will become smoke. And he vanished again into darkness. Orhan Sahib stood alone for a moment at the bridge parapet, looking down at the river. He thought of Yaqid's corpse in mud. He thought of Shahanshah's crown glittering above hunger. He thought of letters as weapons, of fear as a lever, of how every war is fought in two places, the field and the heart. Tarhan stepped beside him quietly. Sahib. Orhan Sahib did not turn. Speak. Tarhan's voice was low. If Shahanshah comes to the ford, it will be under deceit. He will not come bare. Orhan Sahib nodded slowly. He cannot, he is Shahanshah. Tarhan's grip tightened on his shield strap. Then why invite him? Orhan Sahib finally turned his head slightly, his eyes reflecting firelight and something older. Because a desperate man believes deceit will save him, he will come thinking he holds the script, and when he steps onto ground we prepared, he will learn that Allah writes the final line. Behind them, the camp murmured in low voices, men sharpening blades, men whispering prayers, men staring into the dark as if they could see tomorrow's dead walking toward them. Far across the valley, Shahanshah's campfires glowed like a scattered constellation fallen to earth. Drums beat occasionally, not in marching rhythm now, but in warnings and signals. He was rearranging his pieces. He was nursing rage. He was deciding whether to gamble everything on one brutal act. As midnight approached, a distant scream carried faintly on the wind, from far behind the bridge, from the direction of the villages. It was brief, Arabic. That Arabic meme, it vanished as if swallowed. Tarhan's head snapped toward the sound. Damir Khan rose, Faladio's eyes widened, fury flaring even through pain. Abdul Rahman's lips moved faster in supplication. Orhan Sahib's face became stone. He listened. Silence returned, but it was a silence that felt stained. He spoke softly, and his voice carried the cold certainty of a commander who knows what desperation does. Shahanshah has begun. Tarhan's voice was tight. What is it? Orhan Sahib's gaze remained fixed into the dark behind them where the scream had come from, either a raid or a message. Damir Khan's jaw clenched. We sent riders. Orhan Sahib nodded, and we will send more, but we cannot run in 10 directions. That is what he wants. He wants the bridge to become irrelevant because our hearts are pulled apart by fire behind us. He turned sharply, calling to Jarkata Sahib, triple the nearside watch. If Shahanshah's riders try to slip past in the dark, you cut them down and leave their bodies as signposts. Jarkata Sahib bowed and moved. Orhan Sahib then looked to Tarhan, and his voice was a low command forged in urgency. Before dawn we move, not away from the bridge, through the bridge. We will not wait to be bled by raids. We will strike Shahanshah's camp itself, not with full army but with a blade to his throat. We will force him to choose, defend his crown or burn our villages. Tarhan's eyes sharpened. A night assault. Orhan Sahib nodded. A controlled one. Damir Khan will lead a silent force around the ridge to cut their outer pickets. Mustafa holds here with the rest and keeps the bridge sealed. Altadin Sahib remains hidden downriver. And I will go to the edge of Shahanshah's firelight and speak again so his men hear my voice close enough to taste. Faladios tried to rise, pain ripping through him, but he forced words out anyway. Let me go. Orhan Sahib's gaze softened only a fraction. You will live, that is your war now, to survive and lead again. Faladios' eyes burned with helpless rage, but he sank back, breathing hard. The plan settled like a weight onto every shoulder. The river kept whispering. In the last hour before dawn, Killil returned, silent as promised, face streaked with mud, eyes wide with urgency. He took the letter, Killil whispered. Shahanshah's man read it by torch. He smiled. He said, the king will answer at the ford. Orhan Sahib's eyes narrowed. When? Killil swallowed. After sunrise. He believes you will be desperate to bargain. Orhan Sahib's mouth tightened. Then we will teach him what desperation truly looks like. He looked across the valley to Shahanshah's fires, then toward the dark behind them where villages slept in fear. He spoke not as a man making a plan, but as history itself tightening its grip. By Allah, the war is not only steel anymore, it is fire and letters and screams in the night. Shahanshah thinks he can carve fear into our bones and make us kneel. He forgets, bones can break, yes, but faith does not. Tarhan stepped closer, voice like a blade leaving its sheath. Give the word. Orhan Sahib lifted his gaze to the paling eastern sky where the first gray line began to form, thin as a knife edge. Gather the chosen men, he said. When the sun rises, Shahanshah will walk toward the ford believing he comes to claim a traitor, and he will find instead that the river has learned our name. And when his camp hears our steel in their darkness, he will understand that this bridge was only the beginning. The dawn crept in slowly, cold and unforgiving, lighting smoke trails and bloodstains, revealing the bridge littered with broken arrows like dead insects. Across the valley, Shahanshah's army stirred, unaware that a trap awaited its king at the ford and a knife awaited its camp in the next breath of night. Orhan Sahib mounted, Tarhan beside him, Damir Khan already gathering silent riders, Mustafa tightening the bridge guard, Mahmud checking bowstrings, Abdul Rahman whispering invocations into men's ears, Altadin Sahib unseen downriver like a shadow with teeth, Zarkin and Kulads preparing to strike any new wagons that dared to move. And as Orhan Sahib rode toward the coming day, he felt it, the sense that the next betrayal would not come from Shahanshah's ink alone, but from a place closer, warmer, more familiar, because the cruelest knives are often held by hands that once touched your shoulder in brotherhood. The river whispered on and the war leaned forward again, hungry for the next name. The dawn did not rise like a blessing. It rose like an exposed blade, cold and impartial, showing every smear of blood on the stones and every arrow snapped in two, and in that pale light the bridge looked less like a crossing and more like a scar across the river's throat. Mist still clung low, but it no longer hid the truth. The dead lay where they fell, and the living stepped around them with the quiet care of men who know the earth listens when bodies are moved. Orhan Sahib watched the far bank with eyes that did not blink often. He watched Shahanshah's campfires gutter in the distance, watched men moving like ants around burned wagons, watched the smoke of ruined supplies drift and thin, and he knew the enemy's hunger had begun. Hunger is not merely an empty stomach. Hunger is a voice that argues with loyalty in the night. Hunger is a knife that turns inward. Tarhan stood near him, shield strapped, arm wrapped where the reed channel blood had dried into cloth. His jaw was set, and he looked not like a man waiting for orders, but like a weapon waiting for a hand worthy of it. Mustafa held the bridgehead with men packed tight behind timber and stone. Mahmud walked his archers along the parapet, checking bowstrings and counting shafts as if each arrow were a prayer that must not be wasted. Abdul Rahman moved among the ranks with verses low and steady, calming hearts that beat too fast. Palladios, pale and furious, sat propped on a cloak near the barricade, refusing the sleep that pain demanded. Damir Khan moved like a shadow along the bank, already preparing men for the silent strike Orhan had spoken of. Altadin Sahib was gone downriver, hidden with his spikes and his patience. Zarkin and Kulads paced with the scouts, listening for any hoofbeat that did not belong. And Al-Aliadin Sahib learned, torn, tested, stood apart, hands stained with ink from the reply he had written to Shahanshah, eyes fixed on the river as if he could wash fear away by staring at water long enough. Orhan Sahib approached him without ceremony. The men who saw it fell quiet, because even those who had not read the letter understood its poison now. A king's ink does not travel for no reason. Orhan Sahib held Al-Aliadin Sahib's gaze. Your heart is loud, I can hear it. Al-Aliadin Sahib swallowed, throat working. Sahib, I have never betrayed you. Orhan Sahib's voice remained calm, which was more frightening than rage. I did not say you did, but know this, Shahanshah's letter is not only an offer, it is a net. If you struggle, it tightens. If you pretend to accept, it tightens differently. Al-Aliadin Sahib bowed his head, then teach me how to breathe within it. Orhan Sahib nodded once as if approving a soldier's honesty. You will breathe with truth, you will go to the ford. Al-Aliadin Sahib's eyes widened, a flash of terror. Me. Tarhan's posture shifted, ready to protest, but Orhan lifted a hand and kept his eyes on Al-Aliadin Sahib. Yes, Orhan Sahib said, not alone, you will be the face Shahanshah expects to see. If he comes, he will come for you, believing you are a door. If he sends a snake, the snake will come to you, believing you are soft ground. Al-Aliadin Sahib's lips parted, trembling. And if he kills me? Orhan Sahib's answer was immediate. Then you die with honor and your name becomes proof that we cannot be bought. But you will not die if Allah wills otherwise, because we will wrap you in steel you cannot see. Al-Aliadin Sahib looked down at his hands, ink-stained and shaking. I am not a warrior. Orhan Sahib's gaze sharpened. Today you are. A man does not choose when war calls him. He chooses only whether to answer like a slave or a servant of Allah. Al-Aliadin Sahib drew a breath, long and unsteady, then nodded. I will go. Orhan Sahib turned away and his voice carried to Damir Khan. Choose men who can be silent. We move now to the downriver ford, not in a column, in pieces, like shadows that agree to meet. Damir Khan's eyes glinted. He will not see us until he is inside our hands. Orhan Sahib then spoke to Mustafa. You do not leave the bridge. If Shahanshah attacks while we are downriver, you become stone. Do you understand? Mustafa struck his chest. By Allah, this bridge will be a wall of bones before it falls. Orhan Sahib's gaze held him a heartbeat longer. Walls can be undermined. Watch your men, watch their eyes. Shahanshah has ink. Ink makes traitors without sound. Mustafa's jaw tightened. "I will watch." Tarhan leaned close to Orhan Sahib, low enough that only he could hear. "You leave your throat unguarded when you leave the bridge." Orhan Sahib's voice was quiet. "A throat is guarded by what it swallows. Today we swallow risk, so tomorrow we swallow victory." They moved quickly, chosen men slipping into the tree lines along the river, following the bank where reeds grew tall and ground stayed soft enough to hide footprints. The sun climbed, but the smoke of burned wagons and the mist of water made the morning dim, as if the world still hesitated to be fully seen. Downriver, the land narrowed into a bend where the water shallowed and stones broke the surface like old teeth. This was the ford Al-Aliaddin Sahib had named, the crossing a desperate king might attempt when pride refuses retreat. Al-Aliaddin Sahib had prepared it, stakes hidden beneath the surface, sharpened wood angled to rip flesh and belly, and archers concealed among willow and brush, their bows wrapped to keep strings dry. Orhan Sahib did not step into the open. He remained behind brush and stone with Tarhan and Damir Khan, eyes scanning for movement. Al-Aliaddin Sahib stood nearer the waterline, alone in appearance, wearing a plain cloak and no armor that would reveal the steel hidden around him. He looked like a man about to sell his soul, and that was the point. "Steady," Orhan Sahib murmured, and Tarhan's hand tightened on his shield strap. The minutes stretched thin, wind moved through reeds, a heron lifted and flew away as if it sensed what men did not. The river continued its endless whisper, indifferent to kings. Then hooves, faint at first, then clearer, approached along the far bank. A small group appeared, 10 riders, then 20, cloaks dark, armor half hidden. In their center rode a figure in a heavier cloak, posture rigid, guarded by 2 men who rode close enough that their knees nearly touched. They stopped on the far side of the ford, looking across the shallow water at Al-Aliaddin Sahib. Orhan Sahib's eyes narrowed. The central figure was too still, too careful, too protected. Tarhan's voice was barely air. "Is that him?" Orhan Sahib watched, reading distance, reading posture. "No." Damir Khan's mouth tightened. "A decoy." The central figure lifted a hand, and one of the riders called out, "Al-Aliaddin Sahib, Shahanshah sends his greeting. Step into the water, show your sincerity." Al-Aliaddin Sahib's throat bobbed. He glanced downriver for a heartbeat toward where he knew hidden men waited, then he raised his chin. "I am here," he called, voice strained but clear. "Where is Shahanshah? If he desires my oath, let him take it with his own ears." A laugh came from the far bank, sharp and contemptuous. The central figure leaned forward slightly and lowered his hood. "Not Shahanshah." A man younger, face hard, eyes cruel, bearing on his armor the mark of high rank, perhaps a blood relative, perhaps a favored commander, perhaps the knife the king trusted to do what the crown did not wish to stain itself with directly. He shouted back, "Shahanshah does not wade into mud for a trembling scholar. He sends me, Burhan Faladio's rival in your lands may know my name, Zarkin of the crown." Orhan Sahib's eyes flicked briefly toward his own Zarkin hidden elsewhere in war, and the insult tasted deliberate. The enemy wore stolen names as if trying to confuse fate itself. The man continued, voice louder, performing for unseen ears. "Speak quickly, Al-Aliaddin Sahib, your king waits for your obedience." Al-Aliaddin Sahib's shoulders trembled. He was playing his part, but fear is not always acting. "I fear," he called. "I fear what Orhan Sahib will do to my family when he learns." "Enough," the enemy commander snapped. "Cross." Orhan Sahib's gaze sharpened. So Shahanshah did not come. He sent a blade instead, expecting to cut and withdraw, expecting to capture Al-Aliaddin Sahib or kill him and leave his corpse as a message. Orhan Sahib leaned toward Damir Khan, voice low. "We take the blade, we do not waste the trap." Damir Khan nodded once. Across the ford the enemy commander gestured, and his riders began to move into the water. They entered cautiously, hooves splashing, testing depth. The stakes hidden beneath the surface were angled for speed and weight. A careful crossing might avoid them, a rush would not. Orhan Sahib did not allow careful. He raised his hand, and Al-Aliaddin Sahib's archers loosed in unison from the brush. Arrows sliced the air. 2 riders fell immediately, one pitching forward into the water with a shout that became a gurgle, another toppling sideways, hoarse screaming and thrashing. Panic rippled through the crossing group. The men tried to turn back, but turning in a shallow ford with wounded horses and arrows raining is like turning a ship in a storm. Orhan Sahib stepped from hiding and raised his voice like a verdict. "Now." Damir Khan's silent force surged from the reeds on the near bank, striking the riders who had already entered the water. Steel met flesh. Horses reared and slipped, hooves finding stakes, bellies tearing open, blood turning the river red in ribbons. The water carried screams downstream as if delivering them to Allah's hearing. Turhan moved like lightning toward Al-Aliuddin Sahib, placing himself between the scholar and any arrow that might come from the far bank. His shield snapped up, catching a shot that would have taken Al-Aliuddin's throat. The enemy commander on the far bank recoiled, eyes wide. He had expected to control the moment. Instead, the moment controlled him. "Trap," he shouted, and he yanked his horse back from the waterline. Orhan Sahib's voice rang out across the ford. "Tell Shahanshah his ink cannot cross water without drowning." The enemy commander snarled and gestured, and archers on the far bank began to fire toward the brush. Arrows thudded into wood, leaves shredded. One of Altadin Sahib's men cried out and fell, arrow in shoulder, but the concealed positions held, returning fire with discipline, aiming for throats and eyes. In the middle of the chaos, Damir Khan waded deeper, dragging a wounded enemy rider from the water by his collar. The man coughed blood and river, eyes rolling in terror. Damir Khan shoved him toward Orhan Sahib, a captain alive. Orhan Sahib stepped close, blade lowered but present. "Where is Shahanshah?" The captive gagged, spitting water. Not here." Orhan Sahib's voice remained cold. "I know, where is he truly striking?" The captive's eyes darted, fear wrestling with loyalty and the certainty of death. He will." A sudden horn blast echoed from upriver. It was not from Shahanshah's camp. It was from the bridge. Mustafa's signal, urgent, strained. Orhan Sahib's blood cooled. He turned his head slightly, listening. A second horn blast followed, frantic. Turhan's eyes narrowed. They attacked the bridge now. Orhan Sahib did not look away from the captive. "Speak." The captive's mouth trembled. "He sends fire on the river." Orhan Sahib's jaw tightened. "Fire rafts." The captive nodded quickly, desperate. "Oil, timber, they float it, they burn the bridge, they burn your men while you are here." Orhan Sahib's gaze flicked upriver where smoke could already be seen thinly rising, not from the valley wagons but from the direction of the crossing itself. Shahanshah had learned, if he could not take the bridge by pressing men into it, he would take it by turning the river into a weapon. A bridge is wood and stone can be cracked by heat if the fire is fed long enough. Men behind barricades become trapped when flame eats the root beneath their feet. Orhan Sahib turned sharply to Damir Khan. "Finish here, take the captive, kill any who remain, then run. We return to the bridge." Damir Khan hesitated only a breath, and Al-Aliuddin Sahib. Orhan Sahib's eyes snapped to the scholar, who stood pale, shaking but alive. "He comes now." Al-Aliuddin Sahib nodded, stumbling as Turhan gripped his arm and pulled him toward cover. The enemy commander on the far bank saw Orhan's movement and understood this was not merely a trap. It was a contest of time. He shouted orders, and his men began to withdraw, leaving dead and drowning behind because their purpose had been distraction and sacrifice. Orhan Sahib did not chase. He had no time for pride. He had time only for the bridge. They moved upriver at speed, cutting through brush, boots splashing through shallow water, horses brought from hidden positions and mounted without ceremony. The sun was higher now, glaring off river surfaces, but smoke ahead thickened and the sound of shouting grew. As they approached, Orhan Sahib's heart pounded not with fear for himself, but with the cold anger of a commander whose men are being burned while he stands elsewhere. Then the bridge came into view, and the river beneath it was no longer merely water. It carried flame. 3 large rafts, bundles of timber and brush soaked in oil, bound together with rope, floated downstream toward the bridge, each one burning like a piece of hell torn loose. The flames licked high smoke boiling upward in black columns. The heat could be felt even from the bank, and the air tasted of oil and ash. Mustafa's men shouted and braced, trying to hook the rafts with poles, trying to push them aside before they struck the bridge supports. Mahmud's archers fired at enemy boatmen upstream, men in small skiffs guiding the rafts with long poles, trying to ensure impact. Arrows struck water, some struck flesh. A boatman cried out and fell, but the current continued to carry the burning loads forward. On the far bank, Shahanshah's soldiers advanced again, not with full assault yet, but with pressure, hopping to pin Mustafa's defenders while the river did the killing. Orhan Sahib's eyes narrowed to slits. He tries to burn the throat while biting the mouth. Tarhan's voice was tight. If the rafts hit, the bridge will become a furnace. Orhan Sahib raised his voice, cutting through noise. Mustafa. Mustafa turned, sweat streaked with soot on his face, eyes wild with strain. Sahib. Orhan Sahib pointed. Pull men back from the underside. Do not stand where fire will trap you. Mahmud, archers, aim for the boatmen, not the rafts. Cut the hands that guide the flame. Mahmud's voice rose in command, and archers shifted aim, firing in tighter rhythm. Upstream, a skiff rocked as arrows struck. 2 boatmen dropped. One clung to the side, then slipped into the river and vanished beneath smoke and flame reflections. Still the rafts came. Orhan Sahib's mind moved fast, ruthless. Tarhan, take 10 strong men with ropes. We pull the nearest raft to the near bank before it reaches the supports. Tarhan did not question. He grabbed rope coils, barked orders, and men followed him into the shallows. They waded chest-deep, water cold against skin, heat blasting faces, smoke choking throats. The raft approached like a burning beast, popping and crackling, embers flying. Tarhan threw a rope, snagging a protruding beam, and others did the same. Pull, he roared. They heaved, muscles straining. The current fought them, the raft dragging toward the bridge like fate dragging toward consequence. The rope burned where it touched flame. Men cried out as sparks landed on sleeves. One man's beard caught fire and he slapped it out, coughing, eyes streaming. Tarhan planted his boots, braced his shield against the rope to protect it from flame, and pulled with the strength of a man who refuses Allah's decree only by fulfilling it. Slowly, painfully, the raft shifted angle, its nose turning toward the near bank. A sudden snap rang out, one rope burned through. The raft lurched back toward the bridge. Tarhan's eyes flashed. He lunged forward, grabbed the next rope with bare hands despite heat, and yanked, skin blistering. He did not let go, he could not. Orhan Sahib, seeing the moment break, stepped into the water himself, not caring that commanders are not meant to wade into fire. He seized a rope behind Tarhan and pulled. Their men followed, and together they dragged the burning raft just enough that it scraped the near bank and grounded on mud rather than sliding into the bridge supports. Flames roared as oil pooled. Smoke thickened, choking, turning the world into a black tunnel. Now, Orhan Sahib shouted, push it away from the bridge, let it burn here, not there. Men used poles, boots, shoulders to shove, and the raft settled against the near bank, still burning, but no longer a dagger under the bridge's ribs. 2 more rafts remained. One struck a stone support with a thunderous crack, flames spreading along wetted timber that had been prepared by Shahanshah's spies earlier, oil smeared where no eye had noticed. The bridge began to smoke at its base. Heat shimmered. Men backed away, coughing. Mustafa shouted to clear the area, forming a new line farther back. Orhan Sahib's eyes burned as he saw the bridge's underside begin to glow faintly where flame licked and fed. If the support weakened, stone could crack, and the crossing could become death for any man standing upon it. Water, he shouted, bring water skins, sand, earth, smother it. Men ran, dumping water and mud onto the burning support. The river itself was near, but reaching under the bridge while flames raged was peril. 2 men tried and retreated screaming, sleeves on fire. Tarhan stepped forward again, smoke blackening his face. Let me. Orhan Sahib grabbed his shoulder. You have already done enough. Tarhan met his gaze, eyes fierce. Enough is for men who wish to live. I wish to keep you alive. He waited under the bridge support with 2 men, shields raised to block flame, and they poured mud and wet sand onto the burning point, smothering where they could. Fire hissed. Smoke thickened. Tarhan coughed hard, gagging, but he did not retreat until the flame dulled from roar to angry crackle. Meanwhile, the far bank enemy line began to press, sensing the defenders' distraction. Shahanshah's drums resumed, harsh and urgent. Archers fired volleys to keep heads down. Damir Khan returned at a run from downriver, blood on his sleeves, dragging the captive by a rope. Sahib. Orhan Sahib turned, eyes sharp. Hold him, later, now form a counterline. If they rush while the bridge burns, we cut them down on the bank. Faladios, pale but burning with rage, forced himself up, leaning on a spear like a cane. Let me stand in front. Orhan Sahib's gaze flicked to him. You will fall. Faladios' mouth twisted. Then I fall where men can see. Orhan Sahib did not argue further. He simply nodded, and 2 men helped Faladios forward to the line. Faladios raised his sword with a shaking arm, but the motion alone stiffened spines behind him. Men who had doubted their endurance remembered that a wounded commander still stood. Shame is also a weapon. On the far bank, Shahanshah's soldiers advanced into the bridge approach, trying to exploit smoke and chaos. Orhan Sahib stepped into view atop the near-bank rise, raising his blade so the sunlight caught it, and his voice rang like a call to judgment. "Come then, if your king cannot cross with honor, let him cross over corpses." The enemy surged. The clash returned close, brutal, constricted by parapets and burning air. Smoke made eyes water, made breath shallow. Men fought half-blind, guided by shouting and the feel of shields colliding. Swords struck metal with sparks lost in ash. Spears thrust into gaps, finding stomachs, finding throats. Tarhan emerged from the underside, face blackened, hair singed, eyes furious. He slammed into the line, intercepting a spear meant for Orhan's thigh, knocking it aside with his shield and cutting down the wielder with a low slash that opened legs. He moved with grim economy, as if every breath must be spent only on killing the right man. Orhan Sahib fought near the center where the line was thickest because he knew the heart of a battle is where morale is decided. He parried a heavy strike, stepped inside, and drove his blade into the attacker's armpit. He pulled it free and turned, shouting toward Mahmud. Archers' high shots into their second rank break their push. Mahmud's men obeyed, firing over their own line into the enemy's pressing mass. Arrows struck, men cried out, and the enemy push faltered slightly. Then Shahanshah's soldiers brought forward hooks on chains, trying to catch the barricades, trying to pull them apart. A hook caught a timber, and men began to heave. Mustafa roared, "Cut the chains!" Steel flashed, chains snapped, and the hook fell with a clatter, but more came. Shahanshah was learning, adapting, throwing tools into the fight like a gambler throwing coins after loss. Orhan Sahib saw the pattern and turned his head toward Daimir Khan. "Take 20, circle through the ruins, strike their chainmen from the side, make them fear their own tools." Daimir Khan did not speak. He simply moved, vanishing like a shadow with teeth. The bridge support still smoked. The fire raft that struck it continued to feed embers, though smothered. The third raft had passed beneath and burned out farther downriver, harmless now, but leaving a trail of floating embers like cursed stars. The immediate crisis lessened, but the lesson remained. Shahanshah would use the river, the air, anything that could burn or drown. As the fight raged, a shout rose from the far bank, an enemy officer calling for a champion. A tall man in heavy armor pushed forward, wielding a mace that looked like it could crush skull and shield alike. He advanced into the bridge throat, striking down two men with brutal swings, each impact sounding like stone against flesh. Fear rippled. Men stepped back. The line wavered. Tarhan's eyes locked on him. "That is the one." Orhan Sahib nodded once. "End him." Tarhan moved. He did not charge wildly. He stepped forward with controlled speed, shield angled, blade low. The mace man saw him and laughed, spittle flying. "Come, little shield," the man snarled. "Let me crush you and feed your commander to the river." Tarhan did not answer with insult. He answered with silence, which is the language of men who intend to kill. The mace swung down, heavy as judgment. Tarhan raised his shield. The impact shook his arm to the bone, pain flaring through his already wounded limb. He grunted, feet sliding on blood-slick stone, but he held. The mace man swung again, trying to batter the shield aside. Tarhan shifted, letting the second blow glance off the shield rim, then he stepped in close, where a mace is clumsy and breath is precious. He slashed at the man's knee. The blade bit into leather and flesh. The mace man roared and tried to backpedal, but there was nowhere to go without stepping into his own men. He swung the mace sideways, aiming for Tarhan's head. Tarhan ducked, felt the wind of it, then drove his shoulder into the man's chest, using his shield like a ram. The mace man stumbled, and in that stagger Tarhan's blade flashed upward, sliding under the man's chin where armor did not fully cover. The man's roar became a wet gurgle. His eyes widened, then emptied. He fell backward into the press, his own men catching his corpse unwillingly. Tarhan yanked his blade free, face unreadable, then raised his shield and shouted, voice like iron, "There is no crossing for you here." The enemy line hesitated again, and hesitation on a bridge is death. Orhan Sahib seized it. Push. Mustafa's men surged, driving the enemy back a few paces. The parapets forced them into a narrow retreat, and men stumbled, falling over bodies. A soldier slipped and went over the side, splashing into the river with a scream that ended quickly. Damir Khan's flanking force struck the chainmen at that moment, cutting them down, scattering those who carried hooks. The enemy's tools became useless, abandoned on stone like discarded bones. Shahanshah's soldiers began to withdraw again, not in full panic this time, but in a sullen, heavy retreat, dragging wounded, trying to preserve what remained of their strength. Drums shifted rhythm, signals of regrouping, of frustration. Orhan Sahib did not pursue beyond the far bank line. He held. He always held. He understood that victory is not only taking ground, but choosing when not to be pulled into a pit. He stood amid smoke and blood, breath steadying, eyes scanning for the next threat. When he spoke, it was to his own men, but the words were meant for the enemy's listening ears as well. "You burn rafts because your courage cannot swim," he called across the river valley. "You send letters because your honor cannot stand. Shahanshah, you will find no bridge into our souls." The enemy withdrew farther, and their campfires grew more distant again. Only then did Orhan Sahib allow himself to turn toward the captive Damir Khan held. The man was bleeding, soaked, eyes wild. Orhan Sahib stepped close. "Now you speak fully." The captive's lips trembled. "Shahanshah, he plans more than the bridge. He sent riders behind you last night to take hostages, to burn granaries, to make your men choose between family and command." Orhan Sahib's face hardened. "Where?" The captive swallowed. "2 villages near the Cedar Hill and the road shrine. He aims there first because it is close." Tarhan's jaw clenched. Damir Khan's eyes narrowed. Mustafa, hearing, looked as if someone had placed a stone on his chest. Orhan Sahib did not rage. He became colder. "How many riders?" 50, maybe more, led by a captain named Kuleds. At the name, Orhan Sahib's gaze snapped sideways because Kuleds was one of their own, a supporting captain whose name had been spoken among them with trust. But this was the enemy speaking. It could be deception meant to seed suspicion. Their Kuleds stood not far away, having returned earlier with Zarkin. He stiffened, eyes widening. "My Sahib," Kuled said quickly, voice tight, "by Allah, I have not." Orhan Sahib raised a hand, silencing both the captive's poison and Kuled's panic. "Names are easy to steal. Shahanshah steals names as he steals oaths." He turned back to the captive. "Describe this Kuled's his face." The captive blinked, confused. "Scar on the cheek, a missing tooth, speaks with a limp tongue." Orhan Sahib's gaze shifted to their Kuled's, whose face was unscarred, whose teeth were whole. Kuled's exhaled, relief mixed with humiliation. Orhan Sahib looked back at the captive. "So, another knife wearing a familiar name." He stepped closer, voice low enough that only the captive heard. "Listen carefully. If you lie, you die slowly. If you speak truth, you may live long enough to regret serving Shahanshah." The captive sobbed, words spilling. "It is truth. He calls him Kuleds of the Crown, a raider. He rides fast. He will burn to make you run." Orhan Sahib turned sharply. "Damir Khan." Damir Khan straightened. "Sahib." "You take riders now," Orhan Sahib commanded. "Hard and fast. Find the raiders behind us. Cut them down. If hostages are taken, retrieve them. If homes burn, kill the men who light them and let their bodies cool in the ash." Damir Khan nodded, once already moving. "By Allah." Orhan Sahib then looked to Tarhan. "You go with him." Tarhan's eyes widened slightly. "And you?" Orhan Sahib's voice was iron. "I stay. If I leave, Shahanshah will press the bridge again and use the moment to cross. I will not give him that. You are my right hand, but my hand must stretch. Go." Tarhan hesitated, the kind of hesitation that is loyalty wrestling with obedience. Then he bowed his head. "As you command." He turned, gathered riders, and rode hard, disappearing along the near-bank road in a spray of damp earth. Orhan Sahib watched him go, and for the first time that day, a flicker of something human touched his face, worry restrained by duty. Then it vanished. He turned to Mustafa and Mahmud. "You hold, you repair, you rest in shifts. This bridge must be stone in our hands." Mustafa nodded, eyes grim. Mahmud bowed and went to his archers. Orhan Sahib then looked at Al-Aliaddin Sahib. "You will not leave my sight now." Al-Aliaddin Sahib's face was pale. "I obey." Faladios, listening, pushed himself upright again, pain clear, voice rough. "You trust him still?" Orhan Sahib's gaze met Faladio's. Trust is not a gift in war, it is a rope. I hold one end, he holds the other. If he pulls toward betrayal, I will feel it. Faladio's lips curled, half approval, half fury. If he pulls, let me cut the rope. Orhan Sahib did not answer. He only turned his gaze toward the enemy camp in the distance, where Shahanshah's fires now burned in smaller clusters, less confident, as if even flame had begun to doubt its master. The afternoon bled into evening again, and the air cooled. The bridge support still smoldered in places, but the worst of the fire had been smothered. Men worked with stones and wet clay, patching cracks, reinforcing, praying the structure would hold. The river, still carrying soot, reflected a sky turning the color of old bruises. Orhan Sahib sat with the captive again as night approached. The man's fear had become exhaustion. What else? Orhan demanded. What else does Shahanshah plan? The captive swallowed. He speaks of a fortress, north. He will retreat there if he cannot cross, but he will not retreat quietly. He will leave poison behind, burned wells, dead animals in water. He will make your land sick. Orhan Sahib's eyes narrowed. Which fortress? Karagirl Keep, the captive whispered. Old walls strong on the Black Hill. Orhan Sahib's mind turned the name like a stone in his palm. Karagirl Keep would be hard to take quickly, and Shahanshah would hide behind it like a wounded wolf behind rock. Then Orhan Sahib asked the question that mattered most. Does Shahanshah have another traitor in my camp? The captive's eyes darted, his mouth opened, closed, then opened again. I do not know names, but he said the bridge would fall not only by fire, but by a hand opening a door. Orhan Sahib's face became still, the kind of still that precedes a storm. A door not on the bridge, but in the minds of men. A guard who looks away, a sentry who sleeps, a captain who misplaces men at the wrong moment, a message delivered too late. Orhan Sahib stood and walked away from the captive, letting the man's trembling words sink into the camp like a poisoned drip. He moved among his soldiers, listening to their talk, watching their eyes. He saw exhaustion, yes, he saw fear, he saw anger, but betrayal is not always visible. Betrayal often looks like normal breathing. As night fully returned, Orhan Sahib gathered his captains close, including Mustafa, Mahmud, Abdul Rahman, Faladios, Alaluddin Sahib, Zarkin, Kulads, Tamir Boga, Altuddin Sahib, who had returned from downriver, and Jarkata Sahib. Damir Khan and Turhan were gone on the raid hunt behind. Orhan Sahib spoke low, the firelight making his face appear carved from shadow. Shahanshah's fire rafts were not his last trick, he said. He will try again. He will try to make the river his soldier. He will try to burn us, starve us, poison us, and turn us against each other. Mustafa's voice was hoarse. Then we strike his camp. Orhan Sahib nodded slowly. Yes, but not with a full assault. We strike like a needle. We pierce where his pride lives. Zarkin leaned in. Where? Orhan Sahib's gaze fixed on the distant campfires. His command tent, his banner, his drums. If we silence his drums even for one night, his army will feel leaderless and fear will grow like mold. Tamir Boga's eyes narrowed. A night raid across open ground. Orhan Sahib's voice was firm. Across the ground the smoke already darkened. Across the ground our men have bled upon. We know it now. They do not know us within it. Alaluddin Sahib shifted uneasily. And if we fail, he will press the bridge while we are gone. Orhan Sahib's eyes flicked to him, sharp. That is why Mustafa stays with the bulk. I take only those who move like night. Zarkin, you will lead scouts ahead. Kulads, you will guide through the trees. Tamir Boga, you will hold a reserve on the near bank ready to reinforce if Shahanshah attacks. Abdul Rahman spoke softly. And what of the villages behind, Turhan and Damir Khan? Orhan Sahib's jaw tightened. We wait for word. Until then, we do what we must hear. A commander who chases every fire will end with no home left to defend. Faladio's eyes burned. Let me go with you. Orhan Sahib looked at his wound, then at his face. Can you stand? Faladios pushed himself up, trembling but upright. I can bleed and stand. Orhan Sahib held his gaze. Then you come, but you do not chase ghosts, you stay near me. Faladios nodded, a hard agreement. When the camp settled into guarded hush, Orhan Sahib chose his raid force. Not many, 30, perhaps 40, men with steady hands and quiet breath. He left Mustafa with orders to hold the bridge no matter what, and he left Mahmud with strict instruction: do not waste arrows in darkness, save them for silhouettes at the waterline. Then, under a sky with no mercy of moon, Orhan Sahib moved. They crossed the bridge not in a triumphant march but in a whispering flow. Boots muffled with cloth, metal wrapped, breath controlled. The river beneath them sounded louder at night, and the smoke from earlier fires made the air taste bitter. On the far bank, Daimir Khan's ruin-held archers remained as watchful eyes, ready to warn if Shahanshah advanced. They slipped into the tree line and began to move along the valley edge toward the enemy camp.